Somewhere in the woods of Oregon, there is a town that shouldn't exist. A town where the trees watch you, where the ground remembers things that happened centuries before anyone built a house there, where a triangular demon with one eye has been waiting, patiently, for trillions of years, for the right combination of human curiosity and human weakness to tear open the fabric of reality itself. And the only thing standing between that demon and the end of everything? Two 12-year-old kids and a summer vacation they didn't ask for. This is the entire story of Gravity Falls. Not just the episodes, not just the surface plot, the entire story. From the beginning of the universe to the last page of the journal. Every secret, every cipher, every connection that most viewers missed. And I'm going to tell it to you tonight, from the very beginning to the very end, in a way that makes every piece fit together like it was always meant to. Because here's what most people don't realize about Gravity Falls. The show isn't just good. It isn't just clever. It is, when you actually lay out the complete narrative from start to finish, one of the most intricately constructed stories ever told in any medium. Every joke has a purpose. Every background detail is a clue. Every character arc mirrors another character arc in ways that only become visible when you see the whole picture at once. And tonight, you're going to see the whole picture. So settle in. This is going to take a while. And by the time we're done, you'll understand why a cartoon about a weird summer in Oregon is one of the greatest stories of the 21st century. If you enjoy this kind of deep dive, subscribe to Pine Hat. We go deeper than anyone else. The story works whether you're watching or listening. And it starts not in Gravity Falls, not in Oregon, not even on Earth. It starts in a place called the Nightmare Realm with a triangle. Who had a plan? To understand the story of Gravity Falls, you have to start before the story begins, because the events of the show, everything that happens to Dipper and Mabel during their summer in Oregon, are the final chapter of a conflict that has been brewing for longer than human civilization has existed. Bill Cipher is a being from the second dimension. In his original form, he existed in a flat, two-dimensional world, a world of length and width, but no depth. And Bill hated it. He hated the limitations of his reality. He hated the boundaries. He hated that there was more to existence than what his dimension allowed him to experience. And so he did something unthinkable. He destroyed his entire dimension, every being in it, every structure, every trace of the reality that had been his home. He burned it all, and in doing so, he liberated himself, but at a cost. With his home dimension gone, Bill became a being without a native reality. He was cast into the space between dimensions, a chaotic, formless void that would come to be known as the Nightmare Realm. The Nightmare Realm is exactly what it sounds like. It's a place of pure chaos, where the laws of physics don't apply, where form is unstable, and where the boundaries between thought and reality are non-existent. For a being like Bill, a chaos entity who thrives on disorder, it should have been paradise. And in some ways, it was. Bill gained enormous power in the Nightmare Realm. He could manipulate dreams, enter minds, and influence events across dimensions. He became, for all practical purposes, a god. But the Nightmare Realm had a fatal flaw. It was decaying. Without a stable dimensional structure to anchor it, the Nightmare Realm was slowly collapsing in on itself. Bill's home was dying, and if it died, Bill would die with it. Bill needed a new dimension, a stable one, a three-dimensional world with physical laws he could exploit and reshape to suit his needs. He needed Earth. Or more specifically, he needed a way into Earth's dimension. A portal, a rift, a doorway that would allow him and the other entities of the Nightmare Realm to cross over. And for that, he needed help. Human help. Because while Bill was immensely powerful within the mindscape, the realm of thought and dreams, he couldn't physically affect the three-dimensional world without someone on the other side opening the door for him. So Bill waited, and watched, and reached out, across the dimensional barrier, into the dreams of anyone who might be useful to him. He waited for a very long time, and then, in the 20th century, he found exactly what he was looking for. The story of Gravity Falls is, at its core, a story about two pairs of twins. The pair you meet first, Dipper and Mabel, are the ones the show follows most closely. But the pair who set everything in motion, the ones whose choices created the situation that Dipper and Mabel walk into, are their great uncles, Stanford Philbrick Pines and Stanley Pines. To understand them, we need to go back to the 1960s. to a town called Glass Shard Beach, New Jersey. Stanford and Stanley Pines were born as identical twins. From the outside, they looked the same, but from the very beginning, they were different in ways that would define their lives and, eventually, determine the fate of an entire dimension. Stanford was the gifted one, intellectually brilliant, insatiably curious, and marked from birth by a physical anomaly that would become central to the mythology of the show. He had 6 fingers on each hand, 12 fingers total. This detail, which might seem like a minor physical quirk, would become one of the most important symbols in the entire series. The 6-fingered hand that appears on the journals. The hand that Bill Cipher would use to seal his deals. The hand that marked Stanford as different from every other human being on the planet. Stanley was the scrapper. Less academically gifted than his brother, but fiercer, more street smart, and possessed of a survival instinct that Stanford lacked. Where Stanford lived in the world of ideas, Stanley lived in the world of action. Where Stanford was cautious and methodical, Stanley was impulsive and bold. They complemented each other perfectly, and as boys, they were inseparable. They had a shared dream: to sail around the world together on a boat they were building, the Stan of War. Just the two of them, against the ocean, against the world. That dream died on a single night. Stanford had been working on a perpetual motion machine for a science fair, a project that had attracted the attention of a prestigious college, West Coast Tech, which was considering offering him a full scholarship. It was Stanford's ticket out of Glass Shard Beach. It was his future. Stanley, whether through carelessness or sabotage, and the show is deliberately ambiguous about which, damaged the machine the night before the science fair. Stanford didn't get the scholarship, and in the aftermath, their father threw Stanley out of the house, telling him not to come back until he'd made something of himself. In one night, the twins lost everything: their shared dream, their bond, their future together. Stanford went on to a different college, Backup S'more University, where his brilliance eventually earned him the recognition that West Coast Tech would have provided. Stanley was cast out into the world with nothing, beginning a decades-long journey of failed businesses, scams, and running from the law. This separation, this rupture between two people who were supposed to be together, is the original wound of Gravity Falls. Every event in the show flows from this moment. Every choice the characters make is shaped by it. The portal, the journals, the mystery shack, the arrival of Dipper and Mabel, the return of Bill Cipher, all of it traces back to two brothers who were torn apart and spent 30 years trying, in their own broken ways, to find their way back to each other. After the separation, Stanford threw himself into academics. He earned his PhD. He became a researcher. And somewhere along the way, he became fascinated by a particular area of study: anomalies. Strange phenomena that defied conventional scientific explanation. Things that shouldn't exist, but did. His research led him to a small town in Roadkill County, Oregon. A town with an unusually high concentration of paranormal activity. A town surrounded by forests that were older than they should be, filled with creatures that science had no name for, sitting on top of a geological formation that seemed to radiate an energy unlike anything Stanford had ever measured. The town was Gravity Falls. Stanford arrived with a research grant and a head full of questions. What he found exceeded his wildest expectations. The town was a nexus, a point where the boundaries between dimensions were naturally thin. The paranormal activity wasn't random. It was the result of entities and energies seeping through from other dimensions, attracted by the weakness in the dimensional fabric. Stanford began documenting everything, every creature, every phenomenon, every anomaly. He filled journal after journal with his findings, detailed illustrations, measurements, theories, and warnings. He numbered them: Journal 1, Journal 2, Journal 3. The 3 journals that would become the most important objects in the entire series. But Stanford wasn't working alone. He had a research partner, a man named Fiddleford Hadron McGucket. Fiddleford was a brilliant engineer from Stanford's college days, a man whose technical skills complemented Stanford's theoretical mind. Together, they made rapid progress in understanding the anomalies of gravity falls. And then Stanford made contact with something that changed everything. During his research, Stanford discovered a way to communicate with an entity that existed outside normal dimensional space. An entity that appeared in his dreams, offered him knowledge, and seemed to understand the mysteries of gravity falls better than any human ever could. The entity called himself Bill Cipher. Bill presented himself to Stanford as a muse, a benevolent guide who wanted to help Stanford achieve his full potential. He whispered secrets. He revealed hidden truths about the nature of the universe. He showed Stanford things that no human had ever seen. And Stanford, brilliant but isolated, hungry for knowledge and starved for connection after years of estrangement from his brother, trusted him. Bill told Stanford about the possibility of building a portal, a doorway between dimensions that would allow unlimited access to the knowledge and resources of other realities. Stanford was captivated. With Fiddleford's engineering skills and Bill's guidance, they built the portal beneath what would become the Mystery Shack, a massive, complex machine capable of tearing open the fabric of reality itself. It was exactly what Bill wanted. Fiddleford was the first to see the truth. During a test of the portal, Fiddleford was briefly pulled through to the other side. What he saw there, in the space between dimensions, in the chaos of the nightmare realm, shattered him. He saw Bill's true nature. He saw what the portal would actually be used for. He saw the end of the world. He came back screaming. Fiddleford begged Stanford to shut down the project. He told him what he'd seen. He told him that Bill wasn't a muse. He was a conqueror. That the portal wasn't a tool for knowledge. It was a door for invasion. That everything Bill had told them was a manipulation designed to get them to build the one thing he needed to cross into their dimension permanently. Stanford didn't listen. Not at first. He was too deep, too invested, too proud. But eventually, the evidence became undeniable. Stanford confronted Bill in the mindscape, the realm of thought and dreams where Bill's influence was strongest. And Bill, no longer needing to maintain the pretense, revealed himself. He showed Stanford his true plan, to merge the nightmare realm with Earth's dimension, creating a permanent state of chaos, a reality without rules, without order, without anything that made human life possible. Bill called it Weirdmageddon, the party at the end of the world. Stanford was horrified. He had been used. His brilliance, his curiosity, his loneliness. Bill had exploited all of it. The portal that Stanford had built with his own hands was a weapon aimed at his own world. Stanford shut down the portal. He hid the journals, separating them so that no one person could reactivate the portal without all three. He devoted himself to finding a way to stop Bill permanently. He became paranoid. He trusted no one. He booby-trapped his home. He coded his research in ciphers and symbols. And Fiddleford, broken by what he'd seen, invented a device called the memory gun, a machine that could erase specific memories. He used it on himself, again and again, erasing the horrors he'd witnessed, erasing his knowledge of the portal, erasing pieces of himself until there was barely anything left. The brilliant engineer who had helped build the portal devolved into the town's crazy old man, Old Man McGucket, the local lunatic who lived at the dump and talked to himself. The memory gun didn't just erase Fiddleford's memories. It erased him. The person he had been, the genius, the father, the friend, was dissolved, one memory at a time, until only fragments remained. It's one of the most quietly tragic arcs in the show, and we'll come back to it later, because Fiddleford's story doesn't end in the dump. It ends somewhere much better. But the path from here to there is long and painful. Stanford, now alone, continued his research in isolation. He knew that Bill would try again. He knew that the portal was too dangerous to leave intact, but also too complex to fully dismantle without risking a catastrophic energy release. He needed help. And so, after 30 years of silence, he reached out to the one person he had left in the world. The one person he thought might be able to help him. He called his brother. Stanley Pines had spent 30 years on the road, scamming, running, failing, moving from town to town, scheme to scheme, always one step ahead of the law and one step behind any kind of real life. He had become Mr. Mystery, Rico, various other aliases, a man with a dozen names and no identity. A man who had never stopped wanting to prove his father wrong, to make something of himself, and who had never managed to do it. When Stanford's postcard arrived, the first communication between the brothers in 3 decades, Stanley dropped everything and drove to Gravity Falls. What happened next is one of the most important scenes in the show, and it's worth describing carefully because the details matter. Stanford didn't ask Stanley to come for a reunion. He asked him to come to take the journal, Journal 1, the last one in Stanford's possession, and take it as far away from Gravity Falls as possible, to hide it where no one would ever find it. Stanford was afraid. He knew Bill was still out there, still looking for a way to reopen the portal, and he wanted the journals scattered beyond recovery. But Stanley didn't want to take a journal and leave. Stanley wanted his brother back. He wanted the relationship they'd lost. He wanted to hear that the last 30 years of his life, the exile, the loneliness, the failure, had been a mistake that could be corrected. They argued, the argument escalated, and in the struggle, Stanford was pushed, or fell, into the activated portal. The portal pulled Stanford through, into the space between dimensions, into the unknown, and then it shut down. Stanley was alone in the basement of his brother's house, standing in front of the machine that had just swallowed the only family he had left. The portal was inactive. Stanford was gone, and Stanley had no idea how to get him back. But he had Journal 1, and he knew that somewhere the other 2 journals existed, and he knew that if he could find them, if he could understand the technology that Stanford and Fiddleford had built, he might be able to reactivate the portal and bring his brother home. It was an impossible task. Stanley had no scientific training. He had no knowledge of interdimensional physics. He had no resources. All he had was stubbornness, desperation, and a love for his brother that 30 years of separation hadn't diminished. So Stanley did what he'd been doing his whole life. He improvised. He assumed Stanford's identity. He became the Stanford Pines that Gravity Falls knew, the reclusive researcher who lived in the house in the woods. He turned the house into a tourist trap, the Mystery Shack, using his talent for showmanship and deception to generate the income he needed while he secretly worked in the basement, night after night, year after year, trying to crack the code of the portal. For 30 years, Stanley Pines pretended to be his brother. He learned enough science to make incremental progress. He searched for the other journals without success. He maintained the illusion of the Mystery Shack, while the real mystery, the portal, the journals, the missing brother, remained hidden beneath their feet. 30 years. That's how long Stanley worked in that basement. 30 years of failure and frustration and refusal to give up. 30 years of loving someone enough to dedicate your entire life to bringing them back, even when every rational assessment said it was impossible. And then, in the summer of 2012, 2 children arrived, and everything changed. Dipper and Mabel Pines are 12 years old. They're twins, the second pair of twins in this story, mirroring the first in ways that will become increasingly significant as the narrative unfolds. Their parents, whose faces are never shown in the series, a deliberate choice that keeps the focus on the Gravity Falls family unit, have sent them to spend the summer with their great-uncle Stan. From the kids' perspective, this is boring at best and punishment at worst. They're being shipped off to a tourist trap in the middle of nowhere, run by a grumpy old man they barely know. Dipper is the analytical one. He's smart, anxious, obsessive, and driven by a need to understand things. He keeps a journal. He asks questions that other people wouldn't think to ask. He notices details. He's also deeply insecure, small for his age, socially awkward, and haunted by the feeling that he doesn't quite fit in anywhere. He wears a blue and white pine tree trucker hat that will become one of the most iconic pieces of character design in modern animation. Mabel is the creative one. She's loud, optimistic, aggressively cheerful, and possessed of a boundless enthusiasm that Dipper both admires and finds exhausting. She wears a different handmade sweater in virtually every episode, a visual symbol of her creativity and her need to express herself. Where Dipper overthinks everything, Mabel leads with her heart. Where Dipper sees problems, Mabel sees possibilities. They are, like Stanford and Stanley before them, complementary opposites, two halves of something that works best when it's whole. They arrive at the Mystery Shack expecting nothing, and for the first few days, that's what they get. Stan puts them to work in the gift shop. The town seems boring. The tourist trap is clearly fake. Everything is exactly as mundane as they feared. And then Dipper finds the journal. It happens in the woods behind the Mystery Shack. Dipper, exploring out of boredom, discovers a hidden compartment in a metal tree. A fake tree designed to look natural, but containing a concealed cavity. Inside the cavity is a book. A worn, leather-bound book with a golden six-fingered hand on the cover and a large number 3 in the center of the palm. Journal 3. Stanford's final journal. The one he hid closest to the Mystery Shack. The one containing his most recent and most dangerous research. The one with the entries about Bill Cipher, about the portal, about the threats that Stanford spent his final years in Gravity Falls trying to contain. Dipper opens it, and his summer transforms. The journal is a field guide to the impossible. It documents the creatures, phenomena, and mysteries of Gravity Falls in meticulous detail. Gnomes, ghosts, a shape-shifting creature imprisoned beneath the earth, a living video game, a bottomless pit, an entire ecosystem of paranormal entities that coexist with the normal residents of Gravity Falls, hidden in plain sight, and scattered throughout the journal, written in increasingly frantic handwriting, are warnings. Trust no one. The darkness is watching. Something is coming. The author's paranoia bleeds through every page, escalating from scholarly caution to genuine terror as the entries progress. For Dipper, the journal is everything he's ever wanted. It's proof that the world is stranger and more interesting than it appears. It's a puzzle, and Dipper lives for puzzles. It's validation of his instinct that there's something beneath the surface, that the questions nobody else is asking are the important ones. But the journal is also a trap. Not in the literal sense. It's not booby-trapped or cursed. But in the narrative sense, the journal draws Dipper into a mystery that is far more dangerous than he realizes. The author's warnings are real. The threats documented in those pages are real. And the entity that the author feared most, the triangle with one eye, the dream demon, the being who manipulated the author into building a doomsday machine, is very much still out there. Dipper doesn't know any of this yet. All he knows is that he has a book full of secrets and a summer full of time. And so, with Mabel by his side and the journal in his vest, he begins to explore. The adventure of Gravity Falls has begun. The journal is open. The summer has begun. And for Dipper and Mabel Pines, the town of Gravity Falls is about to reveal itself. Slowly at first, one mystery at a time, in a way that seems random, but is anything but. Because here's what makes Gravity Falls exceptional as a piece of storytelling. The first episodes look like a Monster of the Week cartoon. Kid finds a mysterious book. Kid investigates weird things. There's a funny creature, a chase scene, a resolution, and everyone goes home. Standard animated adventure fare. But creator Alex Hirsh wasn't making a Monster of the Week show. He was hiding a serialized epic inside one. Every early episode, every gnome, every ghost, every seemingly standalone adventure is a breadcrumb. A piece of a puzzle that won't become visible until much later. And when you rewatch those early episodes knowing what's coming, the experience is completely transformed. Jokes become foreshadowing. Background details become clues. Throwaway lines become prophecies. Let's walk through the beginning. And let's start with the very first episode, because it sets up everything. The series premiere is called Tourist Trapped. The plot seems simple. Mabel starts dating a teenage boy named Norman, and Dipper, consulting the journal, becomes convinced that Norman is actually a zombie. He's wrong, but the truth is arguably stranger. Norman is actually a group of gnomes stacked inside a human disguise, and they want Mabel to be their queen. It's a fun, weird, funny premiere, but it's also doing something remarkably sophisticated for a first episode. It's establishing every major theme the show will explore over its entire run. Theme 1. Things are not what they appear. Norman isn't a zombie. He's not even human. The first mystery of Gravity Falls teaches the audience that their first assumption will usually be wrong, and that the truth is always stranger than the theory. This principle will hold true for the entire series, right up to the final revelation about Bill Cipher's defeat. Theme 2. Dipper's analytical mind is both his greatest strength and his greatest weakness. Dipper is right that something is wrong with Norman. His instincts are correct, but his specific theory, zombies, is wrong. He reaches the right conclusion through the wrong reasoning, and his certainty about the wrong details almost prevents him from seeing the real truth. This dynamic will repeat throughout the series. Dipper is always close to the answer, but rarely arrives at it the way he expects to. Theme 3. Mabel's emotional intelligence is essential. Mabel's openness and trust, the qualities that lead her into the Norman situation, are also the qualities that make her resilient when the truth is revealed. She adapts. She fights back. She doesn't collapse when her romantic dream turns out to be a pile of gnomes in a trench coat. She's disappointed, but she's not broken. This emotional resilience will become one of the most important factors in the entire narrative. Theme 4. The twins are stronger together than apart. Dipper can't defeat the gnomes alone. Mabel can't defeat them alone. But together, Dipper's preparation and Mabel's improvisation, they succeed. This is the show's foundational thesis, and it will be tested, strained, and ultimately affirmed in the series finale. And there's one more detail in Tourist Trapped that most first-time viewers miss entirely. At the very end of the episode, after the adventure is over and the kids are settling into the mystery shack, the camera pulls back to reveal Stan, their Grunkle Stan, entering a hidden door behind the vending machine in the gift shop. He descends a staircase into a vast underground laboratory. He approaches the portal. He takes out a journal, Journal 1, and opens it. The show reveals, in its very first episode, that Stan has been hiding a massive secret. That the cheerful tourist trap is built on top of something extraordinary. That the old man the kids have been dismissing as a boring con artist is, in fact, at the center of the deepest mystery in Gravity Falls. Most kids watching the premiere didn't catch this scene's significance, but it was there from day one. The end game was embedded in the beginning. That's the kind of show Gravity Falls is. Before we continue through the major plot points, we need to talk about the town itself, because Gravity Falls isn't just a setting, it's a character, one with its own history, its own secrets, and its own role in the larger narrative. The town of Gravity Falls, Oregon, is small, remote, and surrounded by dense forest. It has a population that seems to hover around a few hundred. It has a single main street, a handful of businesses, a lake, a church, and an economy that appears to depend largely on tourism and logging. It is, in most outward respects, a typical small American town. But Gravity Falls sits on a geological and dimensional anomaly. The town exists at a point where the barrier between dimensions is naturally thin, a weakness in the fabric of reality that has been attracting paranormal entities and strange phenomena for centuries, possibly millennia. The Native American peoples of the region knew about this. Their cave paintings, which appear in several episodes, depict Bill Cipher and other anomalous entities, suggesting that the dimensional weakness has been a feature of this location since long before European settlement. This means that the weirdness of Gravity Falls isn't new. It isn't caused by the portal or by Stanford's research. It predates all of that. Stanford was drawn to Gravity Falls because the anomalies were already there. The portal was built in Gravity Falls because the dimensional barrier was already weak. The town has always been strange. The show's events are just the latest chapter in a very long history of strangeness. The residents of Gravity Falls have adapted to this strangeness in a peculiar way. They ignore it. Not because they can't see it. There are multiple episodes where townspeople encounter paranormal phenomena directly, but because acknowledging it would require them to fundamentally restructure their understanding of reality. So they don't. They look the other way. They rationalize. They forget. This collective denial is actually reinforced by a specific mechanism that the show reveals later. The Society of the Blind Eye, a secret organization founded by Fiddleford McGucket after his mental breakdown. The Society uses memory erasing technology, based on Fiddleford's memory gun, to systematically erase townspeople's memories of paranormal encounters. Every time a resident of Gravity Falls witnesses something unexplainable, the Society shows up and wipes the memory. The result is a town that is collectively amnesiac. The people of Gravity Falls live surrounded by the impossible, and they don't know it. They've had the knowledge taken from them, over and over, by an organization that believes it's protecting them, but is actually trapping them in a state of enforced ignorance. This is one of the show's most sophisticated world-building elements, and it serves multiple narrative functions. It explains why the town seems normal on the surface despite constant paranormal activity. It creates a conspiracy that Dipper and Mabel will eventually uncover. And it establishes a thematic framework that runs through the entire series. The tension between knowledge and ignorance, between the desire to know the truth and the fear of what the truth might cost. Now let's talk about the people who populate Dipper and Mabel's world in Gravity Falls, because these characters aren't just comic relief. Each one serves a specific function in the narrative, and several of them have arcs that are essential to the show's emotional core. Sos Ramirez is the handyman at the Mystery Shack. He's large, gentle, enthusiastic, and possessed of a childlike wonder that makes him an immediate ally to Dipper and Mabel. Sos loves the Mystery Shack with an almost religious devotion. He loves Stan. He loves the weirdness of Gravity Falls. He is, in many ways, the heart of the show, the character whose basic goodness is never complicated or undermined. But Sos carries a wound. His father left when Sos was young and has never been a meaningful presence in his life. Every year on his birthday, Sos waits for a card, a call, some sign that his father remembers he exists. It never comes. This abandonment has shaped Sos's personality in ways that are easy to miss beneath his cheerful exterior. His devotion to Stan is, in part, the devotion of a boy who found a father figure to replace the father who left. His loyalty to the Mystery Shack is the loyalty of someone who finally found a place where he belongs. Sos's arc across the series is quiet, but profound. He goes from being the lovable handyman to being the person Stan trusts to carry on his legacy. The Mystery Shack, by the end of the series, passes to Sos, not because he's the most qualified, but because he's the most devoted. He earned it not through competence, but through love. And that transfer of legacy is one of the show's most emotionally resonant moments. Wendy Corduroy works at the Mystery Shack and is the object of Dipper's first major crush. She's 15, 3 years older than Dipper, and she's cool in the way that 15-year-olds seem cool to 12-year-olds. Relaxed, confident, effortlessly social. She's the daughter of Manly Dan, a lumberjack of almost superhuman physicality, and she's inherited some of his toughness beneath her laid-back exterior. Dipper's crush on Wendy is one of the show's most important emotional threads, Not because it's a romance. The show handles it with remarkable maturity by never allowing it to become one, but because it's a vehicle for Dipper's growth. Dipper's feelings for Wendy drive many of his decisions in the first season, and not always good ones. He lies to impress her. He takes risks to get her attention. He prioritizes his crush over his relationship with Mabel. The show doesn't mock Dipper for these feelings. It treats them as genuine and understandable, but it also doesn't reward them. Dipper has to learn, over the course of the series, that wanting something doesn't entitle you to it, and that the people you admire are more than the versions of them you've constructed in your head. Wendy's eventual response to Dipper's confession, kind, honest, gentle, and clear, is one of the best handled moments of unrequited love in children's media. She doesn't humiliate him. She doesn't lead him on. She tells him the truth. She's too old for him, but she values his friendship and doesn't want to lose it. And then she gives him a gesture of genuine affection, not romantic, but real, that allows Dipper to walk away with his dignity and their friendship intact. Pacifica Northwest begins the series as the show's most obvious antagonist after Bill Cipher. She's the richest girl in Gravity Falls, the heir to the Northwest fortune, and she is, initially, exactly the kind of shallow, cruel, privileged bully that you'd expect. She mocks Mabel. She looks down on the Pines family. She embodies everything that inherited wealth and unchecked status can produce in a young person. But Gravity Falls does something extraordinary with Pacifica. It gives her depth. Over the course of the series, and particularly in the Season 2 episode Northwest Mansion Mystery, we learn that Pacifica's cruelty is a product of her upbringing. Her parents, Preston and Priscilla Northwest, are genuinely terrible people who have conditioned Pacifica to value appearance over substance, to treat people as beneath her, and to suppress any impulse toward kindness or vulnerability. They literally trained her with a bell, ringing it whenever she stepped out of line, Pavlovian conditioning applied to their own daughter. Northwest Mansion Mystery is the episode where Pacifica begins to break free. Forced to work with Dipper to solve a supernatural crisis at her family's mansion, she confronts the truth about her family's history, that the Northwest fortune was built on broken promises and exploitation, and she makes a choice, a small choice, but a real one. She defies her parents. She opens the mansion doors to the common people of Gravity Falls. She chooses, for the first time in her life, to be something other than what she was raised to be. Pacifica's redemption arc is one of the show's finest achievements because it's earned. It doesn't happen overnight. It doesn't erase her earlier cruelty. It simply shows a young person recognizing that she has a choice, that her parents' values don't have to be her values, that the person she was raised to be doesn't have to be the person she becomes. Grunkle Stan, Stanley Pines, living under his brother's identity, is the character who ties everything together. On the surface, he's a con man. He overcharges tourists. He cuts corners. He lies reflexively. He's grumpy, cheap, and allergic to emotional vulnerability. But underneath that surface is a man who has spent 30 years working toward a single goal, bringing his brother home. Every dollar he's scammed, every tourist he's cheated, every night he's spent in the basement staring at equations he barely understands, all of it has been in service of that goal. Stan's entire life in Gravity Falls is an act of love disguised as a hustle, and the show reveals this gradually, beautifully, in a way that recontextualizes everything you thought you knew about the character. Every time Stan seemed cheap, he was funneling money into Portal research. Every time he seemed dishonest, he was maintaining the cover story that kept his brother's work safe. Every time he seemed emotionally distant, he was protecting the kids from a truth that would put them in danger. Stan is, beneath the grift and the gruffness, one of the most devoted characters in the show. And his arc, from the man who lost his brother to the man who brings him back, and then from the man who is reunited to the man who has to learn to share the family he built in his brother's absence, is the emotional backbone of the entire series. The first season of Gravity Falls consists of 20 episodes that, on the surface, function as standalone adventures. Dipper and Mabel encounter a different mystery each week. Gnomes, ghosts, a wax museum that comes to life, a lake monster, a haunted convenience store, a time traveler, a shapeshifter, and more. Each episode is self-contained, with a beginning, middle, and resolution. But Alex Hirsh was playing a long game. Embedded in these standalone episodes are clues, connections, and setups that won't pay off until much later. Let me walk you through some of the most significant ones. The Hand That Rocks the Mabel introduces Gideon Gleeful, a child psychic who runs a rival tourist attraction called the Tent of Telepathy. Gideon seems like a minor villain, a funny chubby kid with a pompadour and a southern accent who has a creepy obsession with Mabel. But Gideon is in possession of Journal 2. This makes him one of only 3 people in Gravity Falls who have access to Stanford's research, and his journal gives him access to genuine supernatural power, specifically an amulet that grants telekinesis. Gideon's possession of Journal 2 is a critical plot point that the show introduces casually, almost as an afterthought, and then develops slowly across the first season until it becomes a major driver of the plot. Headhunters, the episode about the Wax Museum, seems like pure comedy, but it introduces the concept of inanimate objects in Gravity Falls gaining sentience, a phenomenon that connects to the broader dimensional instability of the town. It also features one of the show's earliest and most subtle clues, a wax figure of Stan that melts in the sun, foreshadowing the eventual revelation that the Stan we know is not who he claims to be. The Time Traveler's Pig introduces Blendin Blandin, a time traveler from the future who is monitoring Gravity Falls due to a time anomaly in the area. This episode seems like a fun romp about Dipper trying to undo an embarrassing moment, but it plants seeds for one of the most significant plot threads in Season 2, the time traveler's connection to Bill Cipher and the eventual Weirdmageddon. Dreamscaperers is the episode that changes everything. It's the Season 1 penultimate episode, and it introduces Bill Cipher directly for the first time. Gideon, desperate to defeat Stan and take over the Mystery Shack, summons Bill Cipher using an incantation from Journal 2. Bill appears in a burst of blue flame, a yellow triangle with a single eye, a top hat, a bow tie, and thin black limbs. His voice is high-pitched and manic. His demeanor is cheerful, charismatic, and deeply unsettling. Bill agrees to help Gideon in exchange for a favor to be named later. His task? Enter Stan's mind and steal the combination to the Mystery Shack's safe, which contains the deed to the property. Dipper, Mabel, and Seuss pursue Bill into Stan's mindscape, the internal mental landscape of Stan's consciousness. What they find there is a visual feast of memories, fears, and hidden thoughts. They also encounter Bill directly, and the confrontation establishes several things that will become crucial later. First, Bill is not a physical being in the traditional sense. He exists primarily in the mindscape, the realm of thought, dreams, and consciousness. He can enter and manipulate dreams. He can possess people who make deals with him, but he cannot, under normal circumstances, physically manifest in the three-dimensional world. He needs a vessel. He needs a deal. Or he needs the portal. Second, Bill knows things. He recognizes Dipper. He knows about the journals. He seems to have been watching the events of the summer from somewhere outside normal perception. His knowledge is vast, but not complete. He has blind spots, and those blind spots will become important. Third, Bill is genuinely dangerous. His cheerful demeanor masks a capacity for cruelty that is absolute. When he's angered in the mindscape, the veneer drops and something ancient and terrible shows through. He's not playing at being a villain. He is one. He's just having fun with the presentation. And fourth, and this is the detail that most viewers don't catch on first viewing, Bill drops hints about his history with the town. He mentions Stanford. He references the portal. He knows the layout of the Mystery Shack. He's been here before. He has unfinished business. The episode ends with Bill's defeat. Temporary, conditional, and clearly not permanent. As he's expelled from Stan's mind, he delivers a warning that doubles as a promise. He'll be back. And when he comes back, the stakes will be much, much higher. Dreamscaperers is the episode that transforms Gravity Falls from a great adventure show into something more. It reveals that the individual mysteries of the first season are connected to a larger threat. It introduces a villain with genuine menace and deep ties to the show's mythology. And it signals to the audience that the story they've been watching is bigger than they thought, that the Monster of the Week format was always a disguise for something more ambitious. The first season culminates in Gideon Rises, an episode that brings the Gideon arc to a dramatic head while setting up the central conflict of Season 2. Gideon, using the power of Journal 2 and a giant robot he's built from the journal's blueprints, takes over the Mystery Shack. He evicts the Pines family. He claims the shack and everything in it, including, though he doesn't realize it, the hidden basement laboratory and the portal. The Pines family is on the street. Stan, Dipper, and Mabel have lost their home. And Dipper, who has been carrying Journal 3 all summer, faces a crisis. Without the shack, without resources, without a base of operations, how can he continue investigating the mysteries of Gravity Falls? The resolution involves the entire family working together. Stan's cunning, Dipper's knowledge, Mabel's bravery, to defeat Gideon and reclaim the shack. Gideon is exposed as a fraud, arrested, and his Journal 2 is recovered. But the episode's most important moment comes at the very end. Stan now has 2 journals. Journal 1, which he's had for 30 years, and Journal 2, recovered from Gideon. He opens them side by side in the basement laboratory, and for the first time, the pieces begin to come together. The portal blueprints, split across multiple journals, start to form a complete picture. Stan looks at the portal, he looks at the journals, and the audience sees, for the first time, the full scope of what Stanley Pines has been working toward. Not a con, not a scheme, a rescue mission. A 30-year-long rescue mission to save his brother. The first season ends with this revelation hanging in the air. The audience now knows that there's a portal beneath the Mystery Shack, that Stan is trying to activate it, and that something or someone is on the other side. They don't know what's coming, but they can feel it. And what's coming is the greatest season of animated television ever produced. We're through the first season now. The seeds have been planted. The characters are in place. The mythology is established. And the story is about to accelerate in ways that no one, not the characters, not the audience, is prepared for. Take a breath. Let yourself settle. The first season of Gravity Falls is the foundation. It's fun, and it's smart, and it's full of hidden depth. But it's the second season where the show becomes something truly extraordinary, where the mysteries deepen, the stakes rise, and the emotional core of the story, the bond between twins, the cost of secrets, the price of knowledge, is tested to its absolute limit. We're going there next, and we're going to take our time, because every moment matters. Season 2 of Gravity Falls begins with a shift that you can feel from the very first frame. The colors are slightly darker. The music is slightly more complex. The jokes are still there. Gravity Falls never stops being funny. But there's a weight underneath them that wasn't present before. A sense that the story has entered a new phase. That the time for standalone adventures is ending, and the time for consequences is beginning. Alex Hirsh has said that Season 2 was always intended to be the final season. Gravity Falls was designed as a closed narrative, a story with a beginning, a middle, and an end. There were no plans for Season 3, no intention to extend the show beyond its natural conclusion. This is extraordinarily rare in television animation, where successful shows are typically continued for as long as they remain profitable. Hirsh fought for the right to end his show on his own terms, and that decision, that willingness to stop, is one of the main reasons why Gravity Falls works as well as it does. Because Gravity Falls doesn't overstay its welcome. It doesn't dilute its story with filler seasons or unnecessary extensions. It says what it needs to say, builds to the climax it was always building to, and then it ends. Cleanly. Completely. Perfectly. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Before the ending, there's the middle. And the middle of Gravity Falls is where the show does some of the bravest, most emotionally devastating work in the history of children's animation. Let's begin Season 2. The Season 2 premiere, Scary Oak, opens with an immediate escalation. Dipper, emboldened by the discoveries of the first season and hungry for validation, contacts a government agent, Agent Powers, and attempts to share his knowledge of Gravity Falls' paranormal activity. He wants recognition. He wants someone in authority to acknowledge what he's found. He wants to be taken seriously. Instead, he accidentally raises the dead. Using a spell from Journal 3, Dipper inadvertently triggers a zombie apocalypse at the Mystery Shack's grand reopening party. Actual zombies, rising from the ground, attacking the townspeople, the kind of full-scale supernatural catastrophe that the first season only hinted at. The resolution is fun. The zombies are defeated by a karaoke rendition of a specific frequency that shatters their skulls. But the episode's real purpose is to establish the new rules of Season 2. The stakes are higher. The consequences are more real. The supernatural threats are no longer contained to individual episodes. They're escalating. And Dipper's hunger for knowledge, his need to push further and deeper into the mysteries of Gravity Falls, is becoming genuinely dangerous. The episode also deepens Stan's arc. During the zombie attack, Stan is forced to reveal to Dipper and Mabel that he knows the supernatural is real, that he's known all along, that the Mystery Shack's fake attractions are built on top of genuine phenomena. It's a small crack in Stan's armor of secrecy, and it foreshadows the much larger crack that's coming. But the most important thing about Scary Oak is what it tells the audience about the show's direction. Season 1 was about discovery. Season 2 is about consequences. The mysteries that Dipper uncovered in the first season are going to start colliding with each other, and the collisions are going to cause damage to the town, to the family, and to Dipper himself. Into the Bunker is one of the most important episodes of Season 2, both for what it reveals about the mythology and for what it does to Dipper's emotional arc. Dipper, Mabel, Wendy, and Seuss discover a hidden bunker beneath the woods, a survival shelter built by the author of the journals. Inside, they find provisions, research materials, and evidence of the author's increasing paranoia. The bunker was designed as a last resort, a place to hide if things went catastrophically wrong. They also find a creature, the Shapeshifter, a being documented in Journal 3 as one of the author's most dangerous experiments, an entity capable of assuming any form by observing it. The Shapeshifter was imprisoned in the bunker after it became too dangerous to control, and it has been waiting in cryogenic stasis for decades. The confrontation with the Shapeshifter is one of the show's most genuinely frightening sequences. The creature is intelligent, manipulative, and terrifying in its ability to become anyone. It impersonates Dipper. It impersonates Mabel. It cycles through forms from the journal in a sequence that showcases the show's horror influences. And when it's finally defeated and refrozen, it delivers a warning. One last shift into a form that it says Dipper will see again. A form that will haunt him. The form is the author. This is a masterful piece of misdirection. The Shapeshifter shows Dipper the author's face, or what it claims is the author's face, and the image it shows is designed to scare. It creates the expectation that the author, when finally revealed, will be a threatening figure. A villain, perhaps. Someone to be feared. The real reveal, when it comes, will subvert this expectation completely. But the show plants this seed of dread deliberately, because it needs the audience to be uncertain about the author's identity and intentions. It needs the question, who wrote the journals, to carry both excitement and anxiety. Into the Bunker also advances the Dipper-Wendy dynamic to its emotional climax. Trapped in the bunker, facing death, Dipper considers confessing his feelings to Wendy. The situation pushes him to the edge, and then past it. But the confession doesn't happen in the dramatic, romantic way Dipper imagined. It happens messily, awkwardly, in the aftermath of danger rather than in the heat of it. And Wendy's response, kind, clear, and honest, closes this chapter of Dipper's arc with grace and maturity. Wendy tells Dipper that she's too old for him, that she values their friendship, that she doesn't want things to be weird between them. And she means all of it. There's no cruelty in the rejection, no ambiguity, no false hope, just honesty. And Dipper, to his enormous credit, handles it. He's hurt. Of course he's hurt. But he doesn't collapse. He doesn't withdraw. He accepts the truth, and he lets the friendship continue on new, more honest terms. It's a moment of genuine emotional growth for a 12-year-old character, and it frees Dipper to focus on what actually matters for the rest of the series. The mystery of the author, the threat of Bill Cipher, and his relationship with Mabel. The Society of the Blind Eye is one of the most lore-dense episodes of the entire series. In it, Dipper, Mabel, Seuss, Wendy, and a character named Old Man McGucket discover a secret society operating beneath Gravity Falls, a group dedicated to erasing the townspeople's memories of paranormal encounters. The society uses technology based on Fiddleford McGucket's memory gun, the same device that Fiddleford used to erase his own memories after seeing the horrors of the portal. The society was, in fact, founded by Fiddleford himself in the aftermath of his breakdown. What began as one man's desperate attempt to forget his own trauma evolved into an organization that systematically enforced ignorance across the entire town. The episode's most devastating moment comes when the group recovers Fiddleford's memories, stored in tubes by the society, and plays them back. What they see is a record of a man's disintegration. The earliest memories show Fiddleford as he once was, brilliant, articulate, whole. Each subsequent memory shows him diminished, more confused, more frightened, more erased. The memory gun didn't just remove specific memories. It degraded his entire cognitive architecture. Each use took more than it was supposed to. By the end, Fiddleford had erased so much of himself that he could no longer remember who he was or what he'd been. Old Man McGucket, the crazy old man at the dump, the town joke, the figure that everyone dismisses, was once a genius on par with Stanford Pines. He built the portal. He saw the nightmare realm. He tried to warn everyone. And when nobody listened, he erased himself rather than live with what he knew. This revelation recontextualizes every appearance of McGucket in the entire series. Every time he appeared in the background, muttering to himself, acting erratically, being the butt of a joke, that was a man living with the consequences of dimensional trauma, medicated by his own invention, reduced to a shadow of what he once was. The episode ends with McGucket beginning the long, slow process of recovering his memories and his identity. It's not a quick fix. The damage is severe, and the recovery will take time. But it begins. And the fact that it begins, that knowledge, once lost, can be reclaimed, is one of the show's most hopeful messages. It's also, thematically, the opposite of what the society represents. The Society of the Blind Eye embodies the show's dark thesis, that ignorance is easier than knowledge, that forgetting is easier than remembering, and that most people, given the choice, will choose comfortable blindness over painful sight. McGucket's recovery represents the counter-thesis, that the truth, however painful, is worth pursuing, that the self, however damaged, is worth rebuilding, that it's better to know and suffer than to forget and dissolve. And now we arrive at what many consider to be the greatest episode of Gravity Falls. Some would argue it's the greatest episode of any animated show. Period. Not What He Seems. Season 2, Episode 11. The episode where the truth about Stan comes out. The setup. Government agents have been monitoring unusual gravitational anomalies in Gravity Falls. Objects are floating. Gravity is fluctuating. Something beneath the town is generating an enormous amount of dimensional energy. The agents trace the anomalies to the Mystery Shack and arrest Stan. Dipper and Mabel are left alone, confused, frightened, and for the first time, genuinely uncertain about the man who has been taking care of them all summer. They find evidence in the shack that Stan has been lying to them. They find the hidden basement. They find the portal. They find newspaper clippings that suggest Stan is not who he claims to be, that he may have stolen someone else's identity, that the person they know as Stanford Pines may not be Stanford Pines at all. The episode splits into two parallel tracks. In one, Stan escapes custody and races back to the shack, desperate to reach the portal before anyone can shut it down. In the other, Dipper and Mabel descend into the basement and confront the machine that has been running beneath their feet all summer. A machine that is now approaching full activation, generating gravitational distortions that are tearing the town apart. Stan arrives. The portal is counting down, and the twins face a choice. Stan begs them to trust him. He says he's not the villain. He says that what the portal is about to do is necessary. He says there's someone on the other side who needs to come through. He can't explain everything. There isn't time, but he needs them to believe him. Dipper doesn't trust him. The evidence is damning. Stan has been lying. He's been hiding a dimensional portal beneath their home. He's been manipulating them. Every rational assessment says that Stan is dangerous and the portal should be shut down. Mabel does trust him. Not because the evidence supports it. The evidence doesn't. But because she knows Stan. She's lived with him all summer. She's seen his gruffness and his cheapness and his dishonesty. And she's also seen, beneath all of that, a man who cares about his family. Mabel's decision to trust Stan isn't rational. It's emotional. It's an act of faith. And the show frames this moment as the most important choice in the entire series. Not Dipper's rationality versus Mabel's emotion. The show doesn't pick a winner, but it presents the choice honestly. Sometimes the evidence says one thing and your heart says another. Sometimes the rational choice is wrong. Sometimes trust is all you have. Mabel doesn't press the shutdown button. The portal activates. The gravitational anomalies reach their peak. The basement fills with light, and through the portal walks a man with 6 fingers on each hand. Stanford Pines. The real Stanford Pines. The author of the journals. Alive. Returned from 30 years in the space between dimensions. He steps through the portal, adjusts his glasses, looks at the stunned faces around him, and says, "Who wants to explain what's going on here?" The episode ends, and nothing in Gravity Falls is ever the same. I want to pause here, because Not What He Seems deserves more than a plot summary. It deserves an analysis of why it works so extraordinarily well. First, the emotional architecture. The episode works because it has spent an entire season, and the back half of the first season, building toward this moment. The audience has been asking, who is the author, since the first episode. They've been wondering about Stan's secrets since they saw him enter the basement in Tourist Trapped. Every clue, every hint, every mysterious detail has been leading here. And the payoff doesn't just answer the question, it transforms the question. The author isn't a stranger. The author is family. Second, the character dynamics. The Dipper-Mabel split in this episode mirrors the Stanford-Stanley split that caused the original rift. Dipper, like Stanford, trusts evidence and logic. Mabel, like Stanley, trusts relationships and instinct. The show is drawing a direct parallel between the two pairs of twins, and the parallel carries a warning. The original twins were torn apart by their differences. Will this pair survive theirs? Third, the stakes. The show earns its climax by making the stakes personal rather than cosmic. Yes, the portal could destroy the world. Yes, the gravitational anomalies are tearing the town apart. But the real tension in the episode isn't about saving the world. It's about whether a family can survive the truth. It's about whether trust can endure when trust has been betrayed. It's about whether Mabel's faith in Stan, her decision to love someone despite evidence that loving them might be a mistake, is wisdom or foolishness. The show answers, it's both. It's foolish and wise simultaneously. And that's what makes it brave. Fourth, the reveal itself. Stanford stepping through the portal is one of the most cathartic moments in animated television because it rewards the audience's investment. The mystery was real. The clues were fair. The answer makes sense. It's not a cheat or a twist for the sake of twisting. It's the logical conclusion of everything the show has been building, and it lands with the force of inevitability rather than surprise. You always knew there was someone on the other side of that portal. You just didn't know it was going to feel like this. The episode immediately following Not What He Seems is A Tale of Two Stans, and it's the episode that fills in the backstory we described at the beginning of this video. The childhood in Glasshard Beach, the science fair incident, the separation, Stanford's journey to Gravity Falls, his partnership with Fiddleford, his deal with Bill, and Stanley's 30-year effort to bring him back. This episode is essentially a feature-length flashback, and it serves several narrative functions simultaneously. It recontextualizes Stan's entire character. Everything the audience has seen Stan do, every scam, every lie, every moment of gruffness, is now understood in the context of a man who lost his brother and spent 3 decades trying to fix it. The cheap con artist is revealed to be the most devoted character in the show. It establishes Stanford as a complex, flawed figure. The author of the journals, the person Dipper has been idolizing all summer, is not a hero. He's a man whose brilliance was compromised by arrogance, whose loneliness made him vulnerable to manipulation, and whose inability to forgive his brother created a rift that nearly destroyed the world. Stanford is impressive. He's also, in many ways, responsible for everything that went wrong. It creates the central tension of the second half of Season 2, the relationship between the two Stans. Stanford and Stanley are reunited, but they're not reconciled. Stanford is angry. He blames Stanley for the accident that sent him through the portal. He resents that Stanley has been living in his house, using his identity, running his research facility as a tourist trap. The emotional wound between them is 30 years old and it hasn't healed, and it positions the twins, Dipper and Mabel, as witnesses to a family conflict that mirrors their own dynamic. Dipper, who idolizes the intellectual Stanford, begins gravitating toward him. Mabel, who loves the warm and messy Stanley, feels the family being pulled apart. The generational echo is explicit. The show is asking whether history will repeat itself, whether these twins will make the same mistakes as the previous generation. One of Season 2's most important and most subtly disturbing threads is the relationship that develops between Dipper and Stanford after the author's return. Dipper has been looking for a mentor all summer, someone who understands his curiosity, shares his intellectual passion, and takes him seriously as a thinker rather than dismissing him as a kid. Stan, for all his virtues, doesn't fill this role. Stan is warm and protective, but he's not intellectual. He can't engage with Dipper on the level that Dipper craves. Stanford can. Stanford is everything Dipper aspires to be: brilliant, knowledgeable, experienced, respected. He's explored dimensions that Dipper can only dream about. He's documented phenomena that Dipper has barely begun to understand. He takes Dipper seriously. He treats him as a peer. He offers Dipper exactly the kind of validation and intellectual partnership that Dipper has been starving for. And it's dangerous. Not because Stanford is malicious. He isn't. He genuinely cares about Dipper. But Stanford's influence on Dipper activates the worst tendencies of Dipper's personality. His obsessiveness, his need for external validation, his willingness to sacrifice relationships for knowledge. Stanford, unconsciously, is molding Dipper in his own image. And Stanford's image, as we've already discussed, is that of a man whose brilliance led him to isolation, manipulation by Bill Cipher, and the near destruction of his world. The show makes this parallel explicit. Stanford offers to take Dipper on as an apprentice after the summer ends, to keep him in Gravity Falls, to train him, to pass on his knowledge. For Dipper, this is a dream come true. For the audience, it's a warning, because accepting Stanford's offer would mean leaving Mabel. It would mean choosing knowledge over family. It would mean replicating the exact mistake that separated Stanford and Stanley. This tension, Dipper's pull towards Stanford and away from Mabel, becomes one of the most emotionally charged dynamics of the second half of the season. And it won't be resolved until the very end, when Dipper faces the choice directly and makes a decision that defines his character. A Tale of Two Stans also introduces the object that will drive the rest of the series toward its climax, the interdimensional rift. When the portal was activated to bring Stanford back, it didn't just open and close cleanly. It left a residue, a crack in the dimensional barrier that Stanford has contained in a glass sphere. This sphere contains a small, glowing breach in reality itself. It's stable, for now. But if the sphere is broken, if the rift is exposed to the open air, it will expand rapidly, tearing open a permanent gateway between Earth's dimension and the nightmare realm. In other words, it will give Bill Cipher exactly what he's been wanting for trillions of years. The rift is, narratively, a ticking clock. Its existence creates constant tension. Every scene where someone handles the sphere, every moment where the sphere is in danger, every close call where it almost breaks, all of it is building toward the inevitable moment when something goes wrong. Stanford knows the rift is dangerous. He's trying to find a way to seal it permanently. But sealing a dimensional breach requires knowledge and resources that even Stanford doesn't fully possess. And in the meantime, the rift sits in the basement of the Mystery Shack, one accident away from ending the world. Bill knows about the rift. Of course he does. He's been watching. He's been waiting. And he's been manipulating events, subtly, patiently, through dreams and deals and whispered suggestions, to ensure that the rift finds its way into the wrong hands at exactly the right moment. The stage is set. The clock is ticking. And the characters are being maneuvered, by forces they don't fully understand, toward a catastrophe that they may not be able to prevent. Everything has been leading here. Every mystery Dipper solved, every creature Mabel befriended, every secret Stan kept, every deal Bill whispered. All of it was moving toward this moment. The moment where the careful balance of Gravity Falls tips over into chaos. But the thing about Gravity Falls, the thing that makes it hurt, is that the catastrophe doesn't come from the villain. Not directly. The catastrophe comes from the characters we love making mistakes that we understand. Mistakes born from loneliness, from fear, from the desperate need to hold on to something that's slipping away. Bill Cipher doesn't break the world. He just finds the crack that's already there and pushes. Throughout the second half of Season 2, the relationship between Dipper and Mabel, the relationship that is the emotional foundation of the entire series, begins to strain. Not dramatically, not with a single explosive argument, but gradually in the way that real relationships erode, through small choices, missed connections, and the slow accumulation of unspoken resentment. Dipper is spending more time with Stanford. He's learning about interdimensional physics, about anomaly classification, about the deeper mysteries that Journal 3 only hinted at. He's being treated as an equal by the smartest person he's ever met. He's growing, intellectually, at a pace that his relationship with Mabel can't match. And Mabel can feel it. She can feel Dipper pulling away. She can feel the distance opening between them, not because Dipper doesn't love her, but because his world is expanding in directions that don't include her. Every evening that Dipper spends in the basement with Stanford is an evening he doesn't spend with Mabel. Every new discovery he makes is a discovery she can't share. Every step he takes toward his future as Stanford's apprentice is a step away from the twin bond that has defined both their lives. Mabel's response to this growing distance is complicated and deeply human. She doesn't confront Dipper directly, not at first. Instead, she throws herself into the social world of Gravity Falls with increasing intensity. She pursues crushes. She organizes events. She creates elaborate craft projects. She fills the space that Dipper is vacating with activity, with color, with the relentless optimism that is her defining trait. But underneath the optimism, she's scared. The summer is ending. Dipper might stay in Gravity Falls with Stanford, and if he stays, Mabel goes home alone. Back to school. Back to Piedmont, California. Back to a life without her twin. For Mabel, the end of summer doesn't just mean the end of a vacation. It means the potential end of the most important relationship in her life. And that fear, that primal, overwhelming fear of abandonment, is the vulnerability that Bill Cipher has been waiting for. The show uses several episodes in the late second season to develop the Dipper-Mabel tension through seemingly lighter stories that carry darker undertones. Roadside Attraction takes the family on a road trip to sabotage rival tourist traps. On the surface, it's a fun adventure, but it subtly reinforces the growing gap between the twins. Dipper is distracted, thinking about mysteries. Mabel is trying to enjoy the moment, to squeeze every drop of fun out of a summer that's running out. They're in the same car, but in different headspaces, and the disconnect is visible to everyone except them. These episodes are doing essential emotional work. They're showing the audience what Mabel stands to lose. Not just her brother's physical presence, but the shared experience of being twins. The jokes only they understand. The rhythms of their interaction. The wordless communication that comes from 12 years of being each other's closest companion. Every fun moment in these episodes is shadowed by the awareness that it might be one of the last. The show trusts its audience to feel this without being told. It doesn't have a character say, Mabel is afraid of losing Dipper. It shows Mabel holding on tighter, laughing louder, planning bigger, doing everything she can to make the remaining days of summer so perfect, so memorable, so full that Dipper couldn't possibly want to leave. But Dipper is already imagining a different future. And the more Mabel tries to hold on, the more she inadvertently pushes him to define himself as separate from her. This is one of the most realistic sibling dynamics ever depicted in animation. The twin who's ready to move on, and the twin who isn't. The twin who sees separation as growth, and the twin who sees separation as loss. Neither of them is wrong, and that's what makes it so painful. And then comes the episode that detonates everything. Dipper and Mabel versus the future. Season 2, Episode 17. The episode that hands Bill Cipher the keys to the apocalypse. The episode splits into two parallel storylines that converge at the worst possible moment. In Dipper's storyline, Stanford takes him on a mission to an alien spacecraft that crashed in Gravity Falls millennia ago. The ship contains an adhesive that can permanently seal the interdimensional rift. It's the solution they've been looking for, a way to close the crack in reality and remove Bill's opportunity forever. During the mission, Stanford formally offers Dipper the apprenticeship. Stay in Gravity Falls. Study with me. Become the scientist you were born to be. It's everything Dipper has wanted. And Stanford presents it with genuine warmth and respect, not as a manipulation, but as a sincere recognition of Dipper's potential. Dipper says yes. In Mabel's storyline, she's planning the twins' 13th birthday party. It's the last big event of the summer, her last chance to make everything perfect before they go home. She's excited. She's creative. She's pouring every ounce of her energy into making this party the best night of the summer. And then she finds out. Not from Dipper. Not gently. She overhears it, or learns it through context. The specifics vary in viewers' memories, but the emotional impact is consistent. Dipper is staying in Gravity Falls. Dipper has chosen Stanford over her. Dipper is not coming home. Mabel's world collapses. Not slowly, not gradually. It collapses in a single moment of devastating clarity. Everything she feared, the distance, the growing apart, the abandonment, is real. It's not a possibility anymore. It's happening. Her twin is leaving her. And in that moment of absolute emotional destruction, Mabel is approached by someone who offers her a way out. A way to stop the summer from ending. A way to prevent the future, the terrible, lonely, Dipperless future, from arriving. The someone is Blendin Blandin, the time traveler from Season 1. But Blendin isn't Blendin anymore. He's being possessed by Bill Cipher. Bill, speaking through Blendin, offers Mabel a deal. He offers her an eternal summer. A bubble of time where the fun never stops, where Dipper never leaves, where nothing ever has to change. All she has to do is give him one small thing. The rift. Mabel, shattered and desperate and not thinking clearly, because how could she think clearly in this moment, hands over the interdimensional rift, and Bill breaks it open. I want to pause on this moment because it's one of the most masterfully constructed scenes in the entire series, and understanding how it works is essential to understanding what Gravity Falls is saying about villainy. Bill doesn't force Mabel to do anything. He doesn't threaten her. He doesn't trick her with false information. He offers her something she genuinely wants, relief from pain, at a moment when her capacity to evaluate the offer is at its lowest. He exploits her emotional state, not her ignorance. This is how real manipulation works. Not through elaborate deception or supernatural coercion, but through the identification of vulnerability and the precise application of pressure. Bill knows Mabel. He's been watching her all summer. He knows her fear of losing Dipper. He knows that fear has been building for weeks. He knows that the apprenticeship offer has pushed that fear past the breaking point. And he knows that in this moment, this specific moment, Mabel will accept almost any offer that promises to make the pain stop. Bill didn't create Mabel's vulnerability. Dipper created it by pulling away. Stanford created it by offering the apprenticeship. The summer itself created it by ending. Bill simply waited for the vulnerability to reach critical mass, and then he showed up with exactly the right offer at exactly the right time. This is what makes Bill Cipher one of the greatest villains in animation history. He doesn't rely on power, though he has power. He doesn't rely on deception, though he's deceptive. He relies on understanding. He understands people. He understands their fears, their desires, their breaking points, and he uses that understanding with surgical precision. The rift opens. The sky cracks. The dimensional barrier between Earth and the Nightmare Realm shatters. And Bill Cipher, for the first time in trillions of years, enters the physical world. The sky turns red. A massive triangular tear appears in the atmosphere above Gravity Falls. And through that tear pours everything that Bill has been holding in reserve. The entities of the Nightmare Realm. The chaos that has been building behind the dimensional barrier. The raw entropic force of a reality where laws don't exist. Bill manifests physically, no longer a presence in dreams or a voice in the mind, but a towering, three-dimensional entity floating above the town. He's enormous. He's golden. His single eye surveys the landscape with an expression of absolute delight. He's been planning this moment since before humanity existed, and now it's here. He calls it Weirdmageddon. The word is perfect. It captures both the absurdity and the horror of what's happening. The rules of reality are dissolving. Gravity reverses. Time fractures. Objects come alive. The landscape warps. The citizens of Gravity Falls are thrown into a state of chaos that no natural disaster could produce, because it's not a natural disaster. It's the imposition of an alien reality onto a world that was never designed to contain it. Bill's first act is to turn the members of the Zodiac, a group of individuals identified by a prophecy as having the potential to defeat him, into decorative banners for his palace. He transforms the Mystery Shack into a floating fortress. He summons his friends, a collection of interdimensional nightmares that serve as his court, and he begins reshaping Gravity Falls according to his will. But Bill has a problem. His power, while immense, is contained. The Weirdmageddon is limited to Gravity Falls. There's an invisible barrier, a natural extension of the same dimensional weakness that made the town special, that prevents Bill's chaos from spreading beyond the town's borders. Gravity Falls is a bubble, and Bill is trapped inside it. To expand the Weirdmageddon globally, to reshape all of reality, not just one small town in Oregon, Bill needs something. He needs the equation to collapse the barrier. And that equation exists in one place, the mind of Stanford Pines. Stanford, who studied the dimensional barrier. Stanford, who understands its mathematics. Stanford, who has the knowledge that Bill needs to complete his conquest. Bill captures Stanford. He turns him to gold, a decorative trophy, a piece of furniture in his nightmare palace. Not destroyed, preserved. Because Bill needs what's inside Stanford's mind, and he'll find a way to extract it. The town falls, the citizens scatter, the old world ends, and somewhere in the chaos, separated from her brother, trapped inside a bubble of false reality that Bill created as payment for her unwitting help, Mabel Pines sleeps. Mabel's bubble, the eternal summer that Bill offered her, is one of the most psychologically complex sequences in the entire show. From the outside, the bubble is a prison, a pink, floating sphere that contains Mabel in a state of suspended animation, trapped in a fantasy world while reality collapses around her. From the inside, it's paradise. Mabel and, as the bubble's internal reality is called, is a world designed by Mabel's subconscious desires. Everything she's ever wanted is there. Dipper, who never leaves. Friends who never disappoint. A summer that never ends. Every crush succeeds. Every sweater is perfect. Every day is an adventure with a guaranteed happy ending. It's beautiful. It's warm. It's exactly what Mabel asked for. And it's a lie. The Weirdmageddon episode Escape from Reality deals with Dipper's journey into Mabeland to rescue his sister, and it's one of the show's most emotionally nuanced sequences. Because the episode doesn't simply present Mabeland as a trap that Mabel needs to be rescued from. It presents it as a genuine temptation. A world that is, in many ways, better than reality. A place where nobody gets hurt, nobody gets left behind, and nothing ever changes. Dipper enters Mabeland and is immediately offered the same deal. Stay. Be happy. Let the real world burn. And the episode gives Dipper every reason to accept. Mabeland offers him Wendy's love, the romantic relationship he's been wanting all summer. It offers him admiration and respect. It offers him freedom from the anxiety and insecurity that plague him in the real world. It offers him everything he's been chasing, served up on a platter, with no catch visible. The catch, of course, is that none of it is real. The Wendy in Mabeland isn't Wendy. She's a fantasy. The adventures aren't adventures, they're simulations. The happiness isn't happiness. It's anesthesia. Mabeland doesn't give you what you want. It gives you the feeling of having what you want, which is a fundamentally different thing. Dipper sees through it. Not easily, not immediately, but he sees through it. And his argument to Mabel, the argument that convinces her to leave, is one of the most honest and painful speeches in the show. He doesn't tell her that reality is better than fantasy. He can't, because in many measurable ways, it isn't. Reality is where people leave you. Reality is where summers end. Reality is where your twin brother chooses a cool scientist over you. Reality hurts. What Dipper tells Mabel is that reality is real. That the pain is real, but so is the joy. That a fake perfect world isn't just inadequate. It's an insult to the genuine experiences they've shared. That the real summer, with all its imperfections and disappointments and fear, was better than any fantasy because it actually happened. Because they actually lived it. Together. And he tells her something else. Something he should have said weeks ago. He tells her he's not staying in Gravity Falls. He's not taking Stanford's apprenticeship. He's coming home with her. Because she's his twin. And no amount of knowledge or adventure or intellectual fulfillment is worth losing that. Mabel wakes up. She leaves the bubble. She chooses reality. Ugly, painful, uncertain, real reality over the beautiful lie. And together, the twins step out into a world that has been destroyed by the very fear that almost destroyed them. The fear of change. The fear of loss. The fear of a future that doesn't look like the past. The show doesn't let Mabel off the hook. This is important. Mabel's decision to hand over the rift, however understandable, however manipulated, had catastrophic consequences. People were hurt. The town was destroyed. Reality itself was damaged. And Mabel has to live with that. But the show also doesn't crucify her. Because the show understands something that lesser stories often miss. Good people do terrible things when they're in pain. The measure of a person isn't whether they make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes. The measure is what they do after. Mabel doesn't make excuses. She doesn't rationalize. She accepts what happened. She accepts her role in it, and she commits to fixing it. Not because she's obligated to, but because it's the right thing to do. Because the same emotional core that made her vulnerable to Bill's manipulation, her love, her loyalty, her refusal to let go of the people she cares about, is also what makes her strong enough to face the consequences. This is the emotional thesis of Gravity Falls, and it's worth stating explicitly. The qualities that make you vulnerable are the same qualities that make you strong. Mabel's love for Dipper is what Bill exploited, and Mabel's love for Dipper is what gives her the courage to fight back. The weakness and the strength are the same thing, viewed from different angles. Dipper's curiosity is what led Stanford to Bill's portal, and Dipper's curiosity is what will be essential to defeating Bill. Stanford's brilliance built the machine that nearly ended the world, and Stanford's brilliance will be necessary to save it. Every character in Gravity Falls is both the problem and the solution. Every gift is also a liability. Every strength is also a weakness. The show never simplifies this. It never pretends that you can keep the strength and discard the vulnerability. They're inseparable. They're the same thing. With Mabel free and the twins reunited, the focus shifts to survival and resistance. The town of Gravity Falls is in ruins. Bill's forces control the landscape. The citizens who haven't been captured or transformed are hiding, scattered, terrified. But they're not defeated. And the show's depiction of the resistance, the gradual coming together of the town's residents to fight back against an incomprehensible threat, is one of its most satisfying arcs. The resistance is led, improbably, by the people you'd least expect. Old Man McGucket, whose recovered memories and restored intelligence make him one of the most capable people in town. Wendy, whose toughness and practical skills make her an effective fighter. The gnomes, the manitors, and the other supernatural creatures of the forest, who have their own reasons for opposing Bill's reality-warping chaos. And at the center of it all, Dipper and Mabel. Not as leaders in the traditional sense, they're 12 years old, and the show never forgets that, but as the emotional core around which the resistance crystallizes. Their determination, their refusal to give up, their insistence that the town is worth saving, these qualities inspire the adults around them to fight when fighting seems hopeless. The resistance sequences are thrilling, They're funny. They're creative in the way that only Gravity Falls can be, using the show's entire mythology, every creature and character and magical object introduced over 2 seasons, in service of the final battle. Nothing is wasted. Everything comes back. The gnomes, the multi-bear, the dinosaurs trapped in tree sap, Fiddleford's inventions, the memory gun, every piece of the puzzle, placed carefully over 40 episodes, locks into position. But the show doesn't let the action overshadow the emotion. Even in the middle of the apocalypse, the character dynamics remain the focus. Stan and Stanford's unresolved conflict, Dipper's struggle with fear and self-doubt, Mabel's guilt and determination, Seuss's quiet heroism, Wendy's fierce protectiveness. The Resistance isn't just fighting Bill, it's fighting for the right to exist as they are, flawed, imperfect, messy, real. Bill offers perfection through chaos. The Resistance offers imperfection through connection. And the show makes clear which one is worth fighting for. We've arrived. The moment that everything has been building toward since a triangle appeared in a cave painting thousands of years before Dipper Pines was born. The moment that 2 pairs of twins, 3 journals, 1 portal, and a summer's worth of mysteries have all been converging on. The final battle for Gravity Falls. And here's what makes it extraordinary. The show doesn't win the battle with a magic weapon, or a power-up, or a chosen one fulfilling a prophecy in the expected way. It wins the battle with the single most human act imaginable. An act of love so selfless, so total, and so devastating that it breaks you even as it saves the world. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's build to it properly. Because the architecture of this climax is as carefully constructed as everything else in the show, and every piece matters. The series finale is an hour-long episode, the longest in the show's history, and it begins with the Resistance preparing for their final assault on Bill's fortress. The Pyramid, as Bill calls it, a massive floating pyramid built from the wreckage of the town, hovering above the ruins of Gravity Falls like a monument to chaos. Inside the pyramid, Bill is growing impatient. His Weirdmageddon is contained. The barrier around Gravity Falls prevents his chaos from spreading to the rest of the world. And the equation he needs to break that barrier, the equation that exists inside Stanford's mind, remains locked away. Stanford, turned to gold and displayed as a trophy, is useless to Bill in his current state. Bill needs Stanford alive and cooperative, or at least alive and vulnerable. He needs to enter Stanford's mind and extract the equation by force. But Stanford's mind is protected by years of training, by knowledge of Bill's methods, and by the same stubborn Pines determination that has been thwarting Bill all summer. Outside the pyramid, the Resistance gathers, and for the first time in the series, the full scope of the show's world comes together in a single sequence. Every faction, every species, every character who has appeared over 2 seasons rallies to the cause. The gnomes arrive, the manitors arrive, the multi-bear, the unicorns, the mer-people of the lake, the sentient creatures of the forest, the townspeople of Gravity Falls, the same people who spent years in collective denial about the supernatural, who had their memories erased by the Society of the Blind Eye, who ignored every sign that their town was special, finally see the truth, and they fight. This is the payoff for all that world building. Every creature Dipper documented in the journal, every entity Mabel befriended, every being the twins encountered and helped and sometimes fought during their summer, they all come back. Not as callbacks or fan service, but as essential parts of the story. The relationships the twins built over the course of the series are what give them an army. Their kindness, their curiosity, their willingness to engage with the weird rather than fear it. These qualities, which seemed like incidental character traits, turn out to be the foundation of the Resistance. Alex Hirsh structured the entire show around this payoff. The Monster of the Week format of Season 1 wasn't just entertainment. It was Dipper and Mabel, episode by episode, building the coalition that would save the world. Every standalone adventure was, in retrospect, a recruitment mission. Every mystery solved was an alliance formed. The show was playing a game that the audience didn't even know was being played. And the reveal of that game, in the final episode, when every thread converges, is breathtaking. Throughout the series, a symbol has appeared in the background, on walls, in the journals, in Bill's own iconography. The Cipher Wheel. A circle containing 10 symbols, each corresponding to a character in the show. A pine tree for Dipper, a shooting star for Mabel, a fish symbol for Seuss, a bag of ice for Wendy, a six-fingered hand for Stanford, a crescent for Gideon, a llama for Pacifica, a question mark for the unnamed character later identified as Seuss, a star, and at the center, Bill Cipher himself. The Cipher Wheel is a prophecy, a configuration, an arrangement of 10 specific individuals whose combined energy, when properly channeled, can defeat Bill. The show has been hiding this in plain sight since its earliest episodes, and in the finale, the characters finally attempt to activate it. The scene is incredible. 10 characters, each representing a different aspect of the show's world, standing in a circle, holding hands, channeling their collective energy toward a common purpose. The ground glows. The air vibrates. Something is happening. Something ancient and powerful. Something that Bill clearly fears, because for the first time in the entire series, Bill Cipher looks scared. And then it falls apart. Stanford and Stanley start arguing, in the middle of the ritual, with the fate of the world literally in the balance. Stanford makes a comment about Stanley's incompetence. Stanley fires back about Stanford's arrogance. The old wound, the wound that has been festering for 30 years, the wound that started everything, reopens at the worst possible moment. The circle breaks, the energy dissipates. The prophecy fails. Bill, his fear replaced by triumphant rage, scatters the group. He captures the twins. He captures the stands. He drags them into the pyramid. And the prophecy, the careful, ancient, cosmically ordained method of defeating Bill Cipher, dies because two old men couldn't stop fighting for 30 seconds. This moment is devastating because it's so human. The universe provided a solution. The prophecy was real. The method was sound. And it failed because of ego, because of pride. Because two brothers who love each other but can't forgive each other let their personal pain override the survival of their world. It's the most Gravity Falls moment in the entire show. The cosmic and the personal colliding. The fate of reality derailed by a family argument. The message is unmistakable. The biggest threats aren't external. They're internal. Bill Cipher is dangerous, but the thing that actually prevents his defeat is the unresolved conflict between two people who should be on the same side. With the prophecy broken and his enemies captured, Bill is in control. He has Stanford. He has Stanley. He has the twins. He has everyone who matters. And he presents his ultimatum to Stanford. Give me the equation. Let me out of this town. Let me expand the Weirdmageddon to the entire planet, or I will destroy everyone you love, one by one, starting with the children. To demonstrate his seriousness, Bill begins threatening Dipper and Mabel directly. The scene is genuinely frightening. Bill's playful mask drops completely, and what's underneath is ancient, alien, and devoid of anything resembling mercy. He is willing to torture children. He is willing to kill them. He has existed for trillions of years, and he has never once encountered a moral constraint that slowed him down. Stanford refuses. Even with his family at stake, even with the children in danger, Stanford will not give Bill the equation, because he knows what the equation means. He knows that if Bill escapes Gravity Falls, the Weirdmageddon goes global, billions of people, the entire planet, all of reality. The lives of 2 children, even children he loves, cannot outweigh that. It's a rational calculation, and it's correct, and it's terrible. Stanley watches his brother refuse. He watches Bill threaten the kids, and he sees, in this impossible moment, something that nobody else sees. A way out. A terrible, beautiful, heartbreaking way out. Here is where Gravity Falls achieves something that very few stories, in any medium, have ever achieved. A climax that is simultaneously a surprise and an inevitability. Something you didn't see coming, but that, in retrospect, was the only way it could have ended. Stanley Pines makes a deal with Bill Cipher, not Stanford. Stanley, the wrong twin, the one without the equation. The one Bill doesn't need, or so Bill thinks. Stanley tells Bill that he'll give him the equation. He tells Bill to enter his mind and take what he needs. Bill, impatient and arrogant, convinced that the Pines family has finally broken, that Stanley has betrayed his brother out of desperation, agrees. He enters Stanley's mind. But it's not Stanley's mind he's entering. It's Stanford's. The twins have switched places. In the chaos of the confrontation, while Bill was focused on his ultimatum, Stanford and Stanley quietly traded clothes, traded identities. Just as Stanley has been pretending to be Stanford for 30 years, now Stanford pretends to be Stanley. Bill enters what he thinks is Stanford's mind, expecting to find the equation. What he finds instead is Stanley's mind, the mind of a con man, a scrapper, a man with no scientific knowledge and nothing that Bill needs. And then Stanford activates the memory gun. Not on Bill directly. The memory gun erases memories from the mind it's used on. Stanford uses it on Stanley. He erases Stanley's mind entirely. Every memory, every thought, every piece of identity that makes Stanley who he is. And because Bill is inside Stanley's mind when it's erased, Bill is erased too. The Dream Demon, the trillion-year-old entity, the architect of Weirdmageddon, destroyed not by cosmic power or ancient prophecy, but by a human technology designed to make people forget, dissolved along with every memory of a man who spent his whole life being underestimated. Bill's final moment is extraordinary. As Stanley's mindscape collapses around him, memories dissolving, structures crumbling, the mental landscape going white, Bill realizes what's happening. For the first and last time, genuine panic crosses his face. He tries to make a deal. He offers anything. He begs. The being who has manipulated gods and destroyed dimensions is, in his final moments, reduced to bargaining with a man whose mind is already gone. Bill reaches out. He speaks backward. His words, reversed, are a final incantation, a last desperate spell. And then he turns to stone. And then the stone crumbles. And then there's nothing. Bill Cipher, the triangle in the sky, the eye in the pyramid, the nightmare that has haunted this story from the beginning, is gone. And so is Stanley Pines. Stanley isn't dead. His body is alive. His heart is beating. He's standing in the ruins of the pyramid, physically intact. But his mind is empty. Every memory has been erased. Every experience, every relationship, every piece of identity that made him who he was, gone. He doesn't know where he is. He doesn't know who the people around him are. He doesn't recognize his brother. He doesn't recognize the children he spent the summer protecting. He is, in every meaningful sense, gone. The body remains, but the person who inhabited it has been erased as completely as Bill Cipher. This is the sacrifice, not death, something worse than death. Stanley didn't give his life to save the world. He gave his self, his memories, his identity, everything that made him Stanley Pines. The scene that follows is the emotional climax of the entire series. Stanford, Dipper, and Mabel surround Stanley. This empty man who looks like the person they love, but contains none of him. Stanford is shattered. The brother he spent 30 years trying to save has been erased by the very act that saved the world. The guilt is total. The grief is unbearable. Mabel pulls out a scrapbook. The scrapbook she's been making all summer. Photos, drawings, mementos, pressed flowers, ticket stubs. A physical record of the summer, of the family, of everything that happened in Gravity Falls. She shows it to Stanley. She tells him stories. She reminds him of things he can't remember. She does what Mabel has always done. She leads with love, with warmth, with the stubborn belief that connection can survive anything. And slowly, impossibly, miraculously, in a way that the show presents as neither scientifically explicable nor entirely magical, but simply as the power of human connection operating beyond the boundaries of what should be possible, Stanley begins to remember. Not all at once, not completely, but fragments. A feeling, a name, a laugh that sounds familiar. The contours of a relationship that his conscious mind has forgotten, but that's something deeper, something encoded not in neural pathways, but in the emotional architecture of a lifetime of love, still holds. Mabel's scrapbook brings him back. Not the memory gun, not Stanford's science, not any technology or magic. A scrapbook. A collection of memories preserved in the most low-tech, most human, most Mabel way imaginable. The scrapbook works because memory isn't just data. It's not just information stored in neurons. Memory is relational. It's emotional. It's encoded in the space between people, in the patterns of interaction, in the way one person's laugh triggers another person's recognition. And that relational memory, the memory that exists in the connections between people rather than inside any individual mind, is what the memory gun can't reach. Stanley comes back because the people who love him refuse to let him go. Because their memories of him, Mabel's scrapbook, Stanford's stories, Dipper's gratitude, serve as external hard drives for a self that has been wiped clean. They rebuild him, memory by memory, story by story, act of love by act of love. It's the most beautiful thing the show has ever done. And it's built on a psychological truth that is as real as any framework we discussed in the Watterson's analysis. We are not contained within ourselves. We exist in our relationships. Our identity is distributed across the people who love us. And as long as those people remember us, as long as they hold our stories and refuse to let them go, we cannot be truly erased. Let's step back and examine why this climax is so effective, because it's doing several things simultaneously that most stories can't manage to do individually. First, it's a surprise that doesn't cheat. The twin switch is unexpected on first viewing, but completely logical in retrospect. The Pines twins have been switching identities for 30 years. It's literally what Stanley has been doing since Stanford disappeared. The solution to the show's final problem is built on the show's oldest premise. It's not a deus ex machina. It's the culmination of the story's central theme. Second, the villain is defeated by his own flaw. Bill's weakness isn't physical or magical. It's psychological. He's arrogant. He underestimates humans. He can't tell the twins apart because he doesn't think human identity matters. To him, they're interchangeable. And that contempt for human individuality is what allows the switch to work. Bill is defeated by his own inability to take humans seriously. Third, the sacrifice is real. The show doesn't flinch. Stanley doesn't just risk something, he loses something. His mind, his self. The cost of defeating Bill is not abstract or temporary. It's personal and devastating. The show earns its happy ending by first putting the audience through genuine grief. Fourth, the recovery is earned but not guaranteed. Stanley's memories come back, but the show doesn't promise that they'll all come back, or that he'll be exactly who he was before. The recovery is presented as ongoing, a process, not a moment. This honesty about the incompleteness of healing is one of the show's most mature qualities. And fifth, perhaps most importantly, the climax resolves the show's central thematic conflict. Throughout Gravity Falls, the tension has been between knowledge and connection, between the mind and the heart, between Stanford's way, brilliant, independent, ultimately vulnerable to manipulation, and Stanley's way, messy, emotional, ultimately resilient, through love. The finale doesn't declare a winner. It doesn't say that emotion is better than intellect, or that connection is superior to knowledge. It says that you need both. Stanford's mind built the weapon that defeated Bill, the memory gun, the understanding of how minds work, the scientific framework that made the plan possible. Stanley's love provided the willingness to use it, the selflessness, the devotion, the readiness to sacrifice everything for family. The mind built the gun, the heart pulled the trigger, and neither one, alone, would have been enough. One detail about Bill's defeat has haunted fans since the finale aired and deserves attention in any comprehensive telling of this story. As Bill is being erased, as Stanley's mindscape collapses around him and his form begins to disintegrate, Bill speaks his final words backward. When reversed, these words reveal a message. Bill is calling out to someone, or something. He's speaking a phrase that, when decoded, appears to be an invocation, a last-ditch attempt to preserve himself, to anchor his consciousness to something outside the mind that's being erased. The exact content of Bill's reversed speech has been the subject of extensive fan analysis. The phrase, when reversed, sounds like a XOLOTL, my time has come to burn. I invoke the ancient power that I may return. The axolotl, a creature that has appeared in Gravity Falls lore, specifically in a tie-in book and encoded messages hidden throughout the series, as a cosmic entity of some significance. The axolotl appears to exist outside normal dimensional space, possibly outside Bill's own level of power. And Bill, in his final moment, appeals to it. What does this mean? Is Bill truly dead? Or did he manage, in his last seconds, to transfer some fragment of himself to another plane? The show doesn't answer this definitively. Alex Hirsh has dropped hints over the years, in interviews, in coded messages, in the published books, but has never given a clear confirmation. This ambiguity is deliberate. Gravity Falls is a show about mysteries, and some mysteries are meant to remain unsolved. The possibility that Bill might return, that his defeat might not be permanent, serves the same function as the unknown in any good horror story. The monster is most powerful when you're not sure it's gone. But for the purposes of this story, for the story of Dipper and Mabel's summer, Bill is defeated. The Weirdmageddon ends. The sky returns to normal. The town begins to rebuild. And the children, who arrived in Gravity Falls expecting nothing, leave having saved the world. The battle is over. The sky is blue again. The trees are just trees. The ground beneath Gravity Falls has settled. The dimensional barrier has sealed, and the nightmare realm, with all its chaos and all its horrors, is locked away on the other side of a wall that nobody will breach again. But the town is damaged. Not just physically, though the physical damage is considerable. The buildings are cracked. The landscape has been warped. The Mystery Shack has taken a beating that would destroy any normal structure. The evidence of Weirdmageddon is everywhere, written in broken windows and uprooted trees, and the shell-shocked faces of people who watched reality unravel around them. The deeper damage is psychological. The people of Gravity Falls, the people who spent decades having their memories erased by the Society of the Blind Eye, who lived in comfortable ignorance of the paranormal world surrounding them, have now experienced that world directly. They can't unsee it. They can't unfeel it. The memory gun still exists, but the show doesn't take that easy out. Nobody erases the memory of Weirdmageddon. The town remembers. And in that remembering, something changes. Something that has been true about Gravity Falls since before the show began. The collective denial, the enforced ignorance, the agreement to pretend that everything is normal, finally breaks. The town knows what it is now. It knows about the weirdness. It knows about the creatures in the forest. It knows about the dimensional instability. And instead of running from that knowledge, instead of erasing it, the people of Gravity Falls choose, for the first time, to live with it. This is a quiet revolution. It doesn't involve battles or prophecies or cosmic entities. It involves ordinary people deciding that the truth, even an uncomfortable, frightening, reality-altering truth, is better than the lie they've been living. And it mirrors, on a communal scale, the same choice that every major character in the show has had to make individually. The choice between comfortable illusion and painful reality. Mabel made this choice when she left Mabeland. Dipper made it when he gave up the apprenticeship. Stan made it when he revealed his secrets. Stanford made it when he acknowledged his mistakes. And now, the town itself makes it. Not because someone forces them, but because the alternative, after everything they've been through, is simply no longer sustainable. The rebuilding of Gravity Falls is depicted in the show's final episodes with a warmth and specificity that rewards close attention. Because the rebuilding isn't just physical, it's relational. The process of repairing the town becomes a vehicle for repairing the relationships that were damaged, or never fully formed, over the course of the series. Characters who were antagonists find common ground. People who were strangers discover shared experience. The social hierarchy of the town, the Northwest at the top, the working class at the bottom, the weirdos at the margins, is disrupted by the shared trauma of Weirdmageddon. When you've all been turned into decorative banners by a dream demon, the differences between rich and poor seem less important than they did before. Pacifica Northwest's arc reaches its quiet completion in this period. The girl who began the series as a spoiled bully has become someone genuinely different, not through a dramatic transformation, but through a series of small choices that accumulated into a fundamental shift in character. Her family's fortune is diminished by the events of Weirdmageddon. The mansion that symbolized Northwest superiority has been damaged, and Pacifica, stripped of the external markers of status that defined her, discovers that she's more than her family name. She's more than her parents' values. She's a person in her own right, capable of kindness, courage, and connection. The show doesn't make a big deal of this. It doesn't give Pacifica a spotlight episode in the finale. It simply shows her in the background and the margins, being different, being better, being the person she chose to become, rather than the person she was trained to be. It's one of the most understated and most effective redemption arcs in animation. Fiddleford McGucket's restoration continues as well. The man who destroyed his own mind to escape the horror of what he'd seen is rebuilding himself, literally and figuratively. His intelligence is returning. His memories are reassembling. He's no longer the town crazy. He's recognized finally for what he always was, a genius who broke under the weight of knowledge that should never have been his to carry. The show gives Fiddleford a moment of genuine triumph in the aftermath. He rebuilds. He reconnects with his son, Tater, from whom he'd been estranged during his years of mental deterioration. The father who couldn't remember his own child remembers him again. The relationship that was severed by the memory gun begins to mend. This is what Gravity Falls does so well in its final act. It pays off the small stories alongside the big ones. The cosmic battle with Bill Cipher gets the spectacle it deserves. But the show understands that the spectacle isn't what the audience will carry with them after the credits roll. What they'll carry is the human stuff, the reconciliations, the quiet moments of repair, the look on Fiddleford's face when he sees his son, the look on Pacifica's face when she realizes she doesn't need her family's money to have value. The central relationship of the show, the one that predates Dipper and Mabel, the one that set everything in motion, the one that was damaged before the first episode aired, finally heals in the aftermath of Weirdmageddon. Not quickly, not easily, and not completely. The show is too honest for that. Stanford and Stanley's reconciliation doesn't happen in a single conversation. It happens across a series of moments, some spoken, some silent, that gradually close the distance between two men who have spent most of their adult lives on opposite sides of an emotional chasm. Stanford has to reckon with his own role in the family's dysfunction. He was the one who shut Stanley out after the science fair incident. He was the one who refused to forgive. He was the one who, even after being rescued from 30 years in the multiverse, couldn't set aside his resentment long enough to complete the Zodiac ritual. Stanford's brilliance, the quality that everyone, including Stanford himself, considered his defining trait, was also the source of his greatest failures. His intelligence made him arrogant. His arrogance made him isolated. His isolation made him vulnerable to Bill. And his inability to forgive his brother nearly cost them everything. Stanley has to reckon with his own contributions as well. The science fair incident, whether it was an accident or an act of jealousy, happened. His decades of scamming and lying happened. His assumption of Stanford's identity, while motivated by love, was also a transgression, a theft of his brother's name, his reputation, his legacy. Neither brother is innocent. Neither is entirely guilty. They are both flawed people who love each other and have hurt each other and need to find a way to live with both of those truths simultaneously. The show doesn't give them a dramatic reconciliation scene with soaring music and tearful embraces. That would be easy, and it would be false. Instead, it gives them something harder and more real: the decision to try, to spend time together, to rebuild the relationship slowly, one conversation at a time, one shared experience at a time, accepting that the damage may never fully heal, but that the effort of healing is worth making. And it gives them the Stano War, the boat, the childhood dream, the vessel that Stanford and Stanley were going to sail around the world before everything went wrong. In the show's final act, the brothers rebuild it, not as children dreaming of adventure, but as old men choosing to honor the promise they made to each other before the world got in the way. The Stano War sails. Stanford and Stanley, together, set out on the adventure they were always supposed to have. Decades late, imperfectly, with the weight of everything that happened between them still present, but no longer unbearable. It's not a fairy tale ending. It's better than that. It's an honest ending. Two brothers who hurt each other, who lost each other, who found each other again, deciding that the relationship is worth more than the resentment, that the future is more important than the past, that it's never too late to build the boat and set sail. With the crisis over and the summer ending, Dipper's choice about the apprenticeship reaches its final resolution, and the way the show handles it is a masterclass in character development. Earlier in the season, Dipper said yes to Stanford's offer. He was going to stay in Gravity Falls. He was going to become the researcher, the scientist, the successor to the author. He was going to choose knowledge and adventure over home and family. In Mabeland, he reversed that decision. He told Mabel he was coming home with her. He chose his sister over his ambition. In the heat of the crisis, with the world literally ending, the choice felt clear. But now the crisis is over. The emotion of the moment has faded, and the offer is still there. Stanford would still take him. Gravity Falls is still full of mysteries. The life Dipper imagined, the life of the mind, the life of discovery, is still available. And Dipper still chooses to go home. Not because the crisis forced him to. Not because Mabel guilted him into it. Not because the show needed him to for narrative reasons. Dipper chooses to go home because he has genuinely grown. He understands something now that he didn't understand at the beginning of the summer. That the most important thing in his life isn't the mystery. It's the relationship. It's Mabel. It's the family he has, not the knowledge he might gain. This is Dipper's answer to the Stanford parallel. Stanford, when faced with a similar choice, his brother or his research, chose research. He chose the portal, the journals, the pursuit of knowledge at the expense of human connection. And it cost him everything. Dipper makes the opposite choice. He breaks the cycle. He looks at the path that led Stanford to isolation, manipulation, and dimensional exile, and he walks the other way. The show doesn't frame this as a rejection of knowledge or curiosity. Dipper doesn't stop being curious. He doesn't stop being analytical. He doesn't become a different person. He simply reorders his priorities. The curiosity is still there, but it's no longer the most important thing. The most important thing is the people he loves. And that reordering, that simple, quiet shift in what matters most, is the culmination of everything Dipper has learned over the course of the summer. Stanford, to his enormous credit, understands. He doesn't pressure Dipper. He doesn't guilt him. He recognizes in Dipper's choice the choice he himself should have made decades ago, and he respects it. It's one of Stanford's most gracious moments. The moment where his own growth becomes visible. The Stanford who arrived through the portal might have argued. The Stanford who survived Weirdmageddon lets go. Mabel's arc resolves with a realization that the show has been building toward since the first episode. Growing up doesn't mean giving up the things that make you who you are. Mabel spent the entire series, particularly the second season, afraid of change. Afraid that growing older would mean becoming boring, serious, and disconnected from joy. Afraid that the fun and creativity and emotional openness that defined her would be crushed by the weight of adulthood. Her fear of the future was so intense that it made her vulnerable to Bill's offer of eternal summer. A world where growth was impossible and change was forbidden. But the events of Weirdmageddon taught Mabel something crucial. Stasis isn't safety. Freezing time, refusing to grow, clinging to a version of reality that can't change, that's not protection. It's a prison. Mabeland was a prison. A beautiful, comfortable prison, but a prison nonetheless. Mabel's resolution is to embrace the future, not fearlessly, because she's still scared, but willingly. She accepts that the summer is ending. She accepts that she and Dipper will go home. She accepts that things will change. But she also carries with her the knowledge that the things she's afraid of losing, her creativity, her warmth, her ability to find joy in everything, aren't things that age can take from her. They're not childish qualities she'll outgrow. They're who she is, and they'll go wherever she goes. The scrapbook that Mabel has been filling all summer, the same scrapbook that helped restore Stanley's memories, becomes the symbol of this resolution. The scrapbook is a record of everything that happened. Every adventure, every friendship, every moment of beauty and chaos and love. It's not a way of holding on to the past. It's a way of carrying the past into the future. Of remembering that what happened was real, that it mattered, and that it will continue to matter even after the summer ends. Mabel's final act of the summer is to give Dipper the scrapbook. Not her only copy. She's Mabel. She's made backups. But the original. The one she assembled by hand, page by page, throughout the summer. It's a gift that says, I trust you with our story. I trust you with the memory of what we shared. I trust you to carry it forward. It's one of the simplest and most powerful gestures in the entire show. The final episode of Gravity Falls depicts the last day of summer. The bus is coming. The bags are packed. Dipper and Mabel are going home. The show uses this final day to give every major character a moment of closure. Not a dramatic conclusion, but a quiet acknowledgement of where they've arrived. Seuss takes over the Mystery Shack. Stan gives him the fez, the symbol of the shack's proprietor, and Seuss receives it with the reverence of a knight receiving a crown. For Seuss, who has spent his whole life looking for a place to belong and a father figure to believe in, this moment is everything. He's not just inheriting a business. He's inheriting a legacy. He's being told, by the man he admires most in the world, that he is worthy of trust, that he belongs here, that this is his home. Wendy gives Dipper her lumberjack hat and takes his pine tree hat in exchange. It's a gesture of equality, a recognition that their relationship, which began as a child's crush on an older girl, has evolved into a genuine friendship between equals. The hat swap is simple, affectionate, and free of romantic subtext. It's exactly right. Pacifica says goodbye to Dipper with an interaction that suggests a future connection, not explicitly romantic, but warm, honest, and full of possibility. The show leaves this door open without forcing it, which is the right choice. Pacifica has grown enough to be worthy of genuine connection. Whether that connection develops is a story for another time. Stan and the twins share their final moments with the messy, gruff, tender energy that has defined their relationship all summer. Stan doesn't give a speech. He doesn't get sentimental in any conventional way. He just hugs them, hard, longer than he means to, and the things he can't say are written all over his face. Dipper and Mabel board the bus. Gravity Falls recedes in the rear window. The summer is over. On the bus, Dipper finds a letter from Wendy. The letter says, simply, to come back next summer. That Gravity Falls will be there. That the weirdness will still be weird, and the people will still be people, and the mysteries will still be waiting. It's a promise. Not of adventure, though adventure is implied. A promise of continuity. A promise that the connections formed during this summer are real and durable, and will survive the distance and the time. The twins look at each other. They look out the window. The bus moves through the Oregon countryside, past the trees that watched them arrive 12 weeks ago, past the road that brought them to the strangest and most important summer of their lives. And the show ends. Not with a bang. Not with a final twist, or a cliffhanger, or a dramatic revelation. It ends with a bus ride. With two kids going home, with the quiet understanding that something extraordinary happened here, and that it's over, and that it's okay for it to be over. Because that's what Gravity Falls has been teaching its audience since the very first episode. Everything ends. Summers end. Adventures end. Childhoods end. The things you love most will not last forever. And the appropriate response to that truth is not despair. It's gratitude. Gratitude for the time you had. Gratitude for the people you shared it with. Gratitude for the mystery and the beauty and the weirdness of being alive in a world that is stranger and more wonderful than you can possibly imagine. The final image of the show is the Welcome to Gravity Falls sign, seen from the departing bus. The sign grows smaller. The town disappears behind the trees. And then, in the show's last moments, a brief message appears. The kind of coded message that the show has been hiding in its credits and its backgrounds and its ciphers since the very beginning. The message, decoded, reads something along the lines of, "The show may be over, but the mysteries remain. It's a final gift to the fans. A final acknowledgement that the story of Gravity Falls doesn't end when the show ends. The journals are still out there. The creatures are still in the forest. The dimensional anomalies are still active. The town is still weird. The world is still full of things that haven't been discovered yet." Gravity Falls doesn't tie a bow on its universe. It leaves doors open. Not for a sequel. Hirsh has been clear that the show is complete. But for the audience's imagination. The show trusts its viewers to carry the story forward in their own minds, to imagine new adventures, to ask new questions, to keep the spirit of discovery alive even after the last episode has aired. This is the final expression of the show's core philosophy. Curiosity doesn't end. Wonder doesn't end. The impulse to explore, to question, to look beneath the surface of things. That impulse is permanent. It's not something you outgrow. It's something you carry with you through every stage of life, into every new experience. The summer ends. The mystery continues. The story is told. From the nightmare realm to the bus ride home. From Bill Cipher's trillions-year plan to Mabel's scrapbook. From the science fair in Glass Shard Beach to the Stano War sailing into the sunset. But we're not done yet. Because telling the story of Gravity Falls is only half of what this video is about. The other half is understanding it. Understanding why the story works the way it does, what it means beneath the surface, and why a cartoon about a weird summer in Oregon has resonated so deeply with so many people. In the remaining sections, we're going to examine the show's themes, its hidden layers, its creative architecture, and its legacy. We're going to talk about what Gravity Falls says about growing up, about family, about knowledge and its costs. We're going to decode the show's visual language and examine the ciphers and puzzles that the creators hid throughout the series. And we're going to talk about why this show, years after its final episode aired, continues to matter. The story is over. The analysis is just beginning. We've told the story, beginning to end. Every major plot point, every character arc, every revelation and betrayal and sacrifice. If you've been listening from the start, you now have the complete narrative of Gravity Falls in your mind, or drifting through it if you've been moving in and out of sleep. But Gravity Falls is one of those rare stories where knowing what happens is only the beginning of understanding it. Because the events of the show, the monsters, the mysteries, the battles, the portal, are the surface layer. Beneath them, woven into every episode and every character choice, is a set of ideas about life, growth, knowledge, and family that gives the story its emotional weight. These aren't hidden messages. They're not Easter eggs or fan theories. They're the actual substance of the show. The reason why a cartoon about a weird summer in Oregon makes grown adults cry. And understanding them transforms Gravity Falls from an excellent adventure story into something genuinely profound. Let's start with the theme that sits at the center of everything. If you had to reduce Gravity Falls to a single question, one question that every character grapples with, that every storyline explores, that the show returns to again and again across 40 episodes, it would be this: is it better to know or not to know? This question is embedded in the show's DNA. It's there in the first episode, when Dipper finds the journal and has to decide whether to pursue its secrets or leave them alone. It's there in the Society of the Blind Eye, where an entire organization is dedicated to enforcing ignorance. It's there in Fiddleford's tragic arc, a man who knew too much and destroyed himself trying to forget. It's there in Stanford's story, a man whose pursuit of knowledge led him to build a machine that nearly ended the world. It's there in Mabel's choice between Mabeland's comfortable fantasy and the painful reality outside. Every major character in Gravity Falls is defined by their relationship to this question. And the show's answer, if it can be said to have a single answer, is characteristically nuanced. It refuses to simplify. Knowledge is good. The show never argues otherwise. Dipper's curiosity is consistently presented as a virtue. The truth is always better than the lie. Ignorance, whether self-imposed or enforced by others, is always presented as a form of imprisonment. The Society of the Blind Eye is a villain precisely because it denies people the right to know their own reality. Mabeland is a trap precisely because its perfection is built on the absence of truth. But knowledge has costs. Real, devastating, irreversible costs. Stanford's knowledge of interdimensional physics led him to build the portal. Fiddleford's knowledge of the nightmare realm destroyed his mind. Dipper's knowledge of the supernatural repeatedly puts his family in danger. The journal that Dipper treasures, the object that defines his summer, is also the object that attracts Bill Cipher's attention, that Gideon weaponizes, that leads to the interdimensional rift. The show doesn't resolve this tension. It holds it. It says, knowledge is essential and knowledge is dangerous. Both are true. The question isn't whether to pursue knowledge. You should, always. But how to carry it. How to seek truth without being consumed by it. How to explore the unknown without losing yourself in it. How to know things without letting those things destroy you. Stanford failed this balance. His pursuit of knowledge became an obsession that severed him from human connection, made him vulnerable to manipulation, and nearly ended the world. He sought truth at the expense of love, and he paid for it with 30 years in dimensional exile. Dipper almost failed the same way. His gravitational pull toward Stanford, toward the life of the mind, the life of pure intellectual pursuit, was pulling him away from Mabel, away from his family, toward the same isolation that consumed his great uncle. But Dipper made a different choice. He chose to know things and to love people, to be curious and to be connected, to pursue truth without sacrificing relationships. He found the balance that Stanford lost. And that balance, the ability to hold knowledge and love simultaneously, to be both a seeker and a family member, to explore the world without abandoning the people in it, is the show's ultimate answer to its central question. It's not either/or. It's both/and. Know the truth. Love your people. Carry both. It's harder than choosing one, but it's the only way to be whole. One of the most sophisticated structural elements of Gravity Falls is its use of parallel twin pairs, Stanford/Stanley and Dipper/Mabel, to explore the question of whether history is destiny. The parallels between the two pairs of twins are deliberate, extensive, and precisely calibrated. Consider, Stanford is the intellectual twin. So is Dipper. Both are driven by curiosity, obsessed with knowledge, and prone to prioritizing their intellectual pursuits over their relationships. Both are physically marked, Stanford by his 6 fingers, Dipper by the Big Dipper birthmark on his forehead. Both are drawn to mentors who validate their intelligence. Both face the temptation of choosing knowledge over family. Stanley is the emotional twin. So is Mabel. Both lead with their hearts rather than their heads. Both are more socially adept than their intellectual siblings. Both are fiercely loyal. Both are underestimated by the people around them. And both, at crucial moments, make sacrifices that save everyone. Stanley by giving up his mind, Mabel by giving up her fantasy. The show uses these parallels to create a sense of cyclical inevitability, the feeling that Dipper and Mabel are destined to repeat their great-uncle's mistakes, that the rift between the first pair of twins will inevitably reproduce itself in the second pair. And then the show breaks the cycle. Dipper doesn't become Stanford. He doesn't choose the apprenticeship. He doesn't sacrifice his family for his intellect. He recognizes the pattern, literally recognizes it, because he's seen what happened to Stanford and Stanley, and he makes a different choice. Mabel doesn't become Stanley. She doesn't let the separation destroy her. She doesn't spend decades in resentment and isolation. She fights for the relationship. She refuses to let go. The twins don't break the cycle through ignorance. They break it through knowledge. They've seen what happened to the previous generation. They've lived with the consequences of Stanford and Stanley's choices, and they use that knowledge to choose differently. This is the show's most hopeful message. History doesn't have to repeat. Patterns can be broken. The mistakes of one generation don't have to define the next. But breaking the pattern requires awareness. It requires knowing the history, understanding the dynamics, recognizing the moment when you're about to make the same mistake, and choosing not to. The Pines family's trauma is intergenerational, but so is their healing. The same family system that produced the wound produces the cure. Stanford and Stanley's conflict created the conditions for Weirdmageddon. Dipper and Mabel's connection created the conditions for its resolution. The family broke the world. The family fixed it. Bill Cipher works brilliantly as a villain on a literal level. He's funny, he's threatening, he's memorable, and his plan is clear and comprehensible. But he also works on a symbolic level that gives the show an additional layer of depth. Bill is, symbolically, the embodiment of pure knowledge without empathy. Consider his characteristics. Bill knows everything, or nearly everything. He's been observing the universe for trillions of years. He understands physics, psychology, history, and the mechanics of reality at a level that no human can approach. He sees all. He knows all. His eye, the single all-seeing eye that is his most iconic feature, represents omniscience, total knowledge, complete awareness, and he is completely, irredeemably evil. Not because he lacks intelligence, because he lacks connection. Bill has no relationships, no loyalty, no love. He destroyed his own dimension and felt nothing. He manipulates people and discards them when they're no longer useful. He treats other beings as tools or toys, never as equals, never as partners, never as family. Bill is what Stanford could have become if he'd continued down his path of isolated intellectual pursuit. He's what Dipper could become if he chose knowledge over love. He's the logical endpoint of a worldview that values understanding above all else and treats human connection as an obstacle or a distraction. The show makes this parallel explicit. Stanford's deal with Bill was born from isolation, from the loneliness of a man who had no one to share his discoveries with. Bill exploited that isolation, filling the role of intellectual companion that Stanford needed. He was the mentor, the muse, the partner in discovery. Everything that Stanford wanted from human relationships but couldn't get, Bill provided, without any of the vulnerability, compromise, or emotional risk that real relationships require. It was, of course, a lie. Bill wasn't a companion. He was a predator who disguised himself as one. But the lie worked because it addressed a real need. Stanford was lonely. Bill pretended not to be lonely. And the illusion of connection was enough to keep Stanford compliant until the portal was built. This dynamic, the seduction of knowledge without the burden of relationship, is the show's warning about a specific kind of intellectual temptation. The temptation to retreat into the mind. To prefer the clean clarity of ideas over the messy complexity of people. To choose understanding over connection because understanding can be controlled and connection cannot. Bill represents this temptation in its purest form. He is the all-seeing eye that sees everything except what matters. The human heart, the family bond, the irrational, unpredictable, uncontrollable power of people who love each other. And that's why Bill loses. Not because he's outpowered, he's the most powerful entity in the show. Not because he's outwitted, he's the most intelligent entity in the show. He loses because his worldview has a blind spot. He cannot comprehend love. He literally does not understand why Stanley would sacrifice his own mind for his brother. It makes no sense within Bill's framework. It's irrational. It's inefficient. It's the kind of thing that only happens when you value something other than knowledge and power. Bill's blind spot is empathy, and empathy is what destroys him. The all-seeing eye couldn't see love, and love is what killed him. Beneath the mythology, beneath the family drama, beneath the cosmic battle between order and chaos, Gravity Falls is about the most universal human experience there is, growing up. The entire show takes place over a single summer, the summer between childhood and adolescence. Dipper and Mabel arrive as 12-year-olds and leave as 13-year-olds. They arrive as children. They leave as something else. Not adults, not yet, but no longer purely children either. Something in between. Something in transition. And the show uses every element of its narrative, the supernatural, the familial, the comedic, the dramatic, to explore what that transition feels like from the inside. Growing up in Gravity Falls means learning that the world is more complicated than you thought. It means discovering that the people you trust are keeping secrets. It means finding out that your heroes are flawed. It means confronting fears that you didn't know you had. It means making choices that will affect other people and living with the consequences of those choices, even when the consequences are painful. But growing up also means gaining the capacity for deeper joy, deeper connection, and deeper understanding. Dipper, at the end of the summer, knows more than Dipper at the beginning. Not just about the supernatural, but about himself, about his sister, about what matters and what doesn't. He's lost some innocence. He's gained some wisdom. The trade isn't even, exactly, but it's real. Mabel's growth is different, but equally significant. She begins the summer believing that growing up means losing the things that make life fun. The creativity, the silliness, the unguarded enthusiasm. She ends the summer understanding that these qualities aren't childish. They're hers. They belong to her at 12, and they'll belong to her at 30. Growing up doesn't mean becoming someone else. It means becoming more fully yourself. The show embodies this message in its very structure. Gravity Falls is a children's show that doesn't condescend to children. It deals with complex themes: betrayal, sacrifice, existential fear, the impermanence of all things, without diluting them for a young audience. It trusts its viewers to handle darkness, ambiguity, and emotional complexity. And in doing so, it demonstrates exactly the kind of growth it's describing. The capacity to hold joy and sorrow simultaneously, to laugh and cry in the same moment, to be both a child and something more. The Mystery Shack is the physical center of the show. Every major event either originates there or returns to it. And its symbolic function is as important as its narrative one. On the surface, the Mystery Shack is a fake. It's a tourist trap. The exhibits are manufactured. The mysteries are staged. The entire enterprise is a con. Stanley Pines making money by selling made-up weirdness to gullible visitors. But beneath the fake Mystery Shack is a real one. The basement. The portal. The journals. The actual mysteries that the fake exhibits inadvertently gesture toward. The Mystery Shack is a lie built on top of a truth. A facade of weirdness covering an abyss of genuine strangeness. This duality is central to the show's identity. Gravity Falls looks like a cartoon about fake mysteries. It is actually a cartoon about real ones. The show's visual style, its humor, its surface-level wackiness, all of it functions like the Mystery Shack itself, an entertaining, accessible exterior that conceals something deeper and darker and more meaningful than the audience initially expects. The Mystery Shack is also a home. Despite being built on deception, despite being a commercial enterprise rather than a domestic space, despite its literal foundation on a doomsday machine, the shack is where the Pines family lives. It's where Dipper and Mabel sleep, eat, work, and grow. It's where Seuss finds his purpose. It's where Stan hid for 30 years. It's home. And the show argues, quietly but consistently, that a home can be built on imperfect foundations. That love can grow in spaces that were designed for other purposes. That the people inside a structure matter more than the structure itself. The Mystery Shack is fake, and it is real. It is a con, and it is a home. Both things are true, and both things coexist, not in contradiction, but in complement. Journal 3 contains a famous warning, written in Stanford's hand. Trust no one. It's one of the show's most iconic phrases, repeated in promotional materials, fan art, and the show's opening credits. And it's wrong. Not entirely wrong. Stanford had good reasons for writing it. He had been betrayed by Bill. He was surrounded by conspiracies. He had learned, through painful experience, that trust could be exploited. In his specific situation, paranoia was rational. But the show systematically argues against this philosophy. Every time a character follows the trust no one principle, every time they choose suspicion over openness, isolation over connection, self-reliance over interdependence, things get worse. Stanford trusted no one and spent 30 years alone in the multiverse. Dipper trusted no one with the journal's secrets and nearly got his family killed. The Society of the Blind Eye trusted no one with the truth and created a town of amnesiacs. Bill trusted no one because Bill is incapable of trust and was destroyed by the one thing that trust makes possible: sacrifice. The show's counter-argument to trust no one is not trust everyone blindly. That would be naive, and Gravity Falls is never naive. Mabel's blind trust in Norman, who turned out to be gnomes, was a mistake. Her blind trust in Bill's offer of eternal summer was a catastrophe. Trust without discernment is dangerous, but distrust without openness is equally dangerous. The show's actual position is more nuanced. Trust carefully. Trust with awareness. Trust knowing that you might be wrong, and choose to trust anyway, because the alternative, a life of suspicion and isolation, is worse than the risk of being hurt. Stanley's entire arc embodies this principle. He trusted Stanford enough to spend 30 years trying to save him. He trusted the kids enough to let them into his life. He trusted his own identity enough to risk losing it. Every act of trust involved risk. Some of them led to pain. All of them were necessary. The show replaces Stanford's trust no one with an implicit counter-principle that is never stated explicitly, but is demonstrated in every major character arc. Trust is a risk that's worth taking. Not because it always works out, but because the things that matter most, love, family, connection, sacrifice, are only possible when you're willing to be vulnerable. And vulnerability requires trust. We discussed the Zodiac prophecy earlier in terms of its plot function, but its thematic function is equally important. The cipher wheel, the circle of 10 symbols representing 10 individuals, is a visual representation of the show's central argument about the power of connection. The symbols are different. The people they represent are different. They have different strengths, different weaknesses, different histories, different perspectives. Some of them don't even like each other. But the wheel only works when they're all connected, when the circle is complete, when the gaps are closed and the hands are joined and the differences are subsumed, not erased, not ignored, but subsumed into a greater whole. This is Gravity Falls' model of community. Not uniformity, not agreement, not the erasure of individuality in service of the group, but the recognition that individual strength is amplified by connection, that the things you can't do alone, you can do together, that the circle is stronger than any of its individual points. The wheel failed because two of its points, Stanford and Stanley, couldn't connect. The personal rift prevented the communal unity. And the show uses this failure to make a point that extends far beyond its own narrative. Division is how the enemy wins. Not through superior force, not through superior intelligence, through the exploitation of the gaps between people who should be allies but can't stop fighting each other. Bill didn't defeat the Zodiac. The Zodiac defeated itself. Bill just waited for the inevitable. We've told the story. We've examined the themes. Now let's talk about how Gravity Falls was made, because the craft of this show is as extraordinary as its content. The techniques Alex Hirsh and his team used to build this world, hide its secrets, and engage its audience go far beyond what is normal for an animated series. They created not just a show, but an experience, a puzzle box that rewarded attention, patience, and obsessive dedication in ways that fundamentally changed the relationship between an animated series and its viewers. Let's start with the man who built the box. Alex Hirsh created Gravity Falls when he was 25 years old. He pitched it to Disney Channel in 2010, and the show premiered in June 2012. He was, by Hollywood standards, absurdly young to be running a show, particularly one with the narrative ambition and thematic complexity of Gravity Falls. But Hirsh had been preparing for this show his entire life, even if he didn't know it. He grew up in Piedmont, California, the same town that Dipper and Mabel come from. He had a twin sister, Ariel, whose personality and relationship with Alex directly inspired the Dipper-Mabel dynamic. The sibling bond at the center of the show isn't a narrative construction. It's a lived experience translated into animation. The rhythms of Dipper and Mabel's conversations, their shorthand, their ability to annoy each other and adore each other simultaneously, all of it has the texture of reality because it comes from reality. Hirsh has spoken about spending summers with his great-uncle in a small town, an experience that directly informed the Gravity Falls setting and the Grunkle Stan character. The feeling of being dropped into a place where the rules are different, where the adults are eccentric, where the ordinary and the strange coexist. That feeling is the emotional foundation of the show, and it comes from Hirsch's own childhood. He also brought a deep love of animation, horror, comedy, and puzzle design. Hirsh was influenced by The Simpsons, Twin Peaks, the films of Hayao Miyazaki, and the adventure games of his childhood. These influences are visible throughout Gravity Falls. The satirical sharpness of The Simpsons, the small-town mystery of Twin Peaks, the emotional depth of Miyazaki, the logic puzzle structure of adventure games. But what made Hirsh exceptional wasn't his influences. It was his ability to synthesize them into something that felt entirely new. Gravity Falls doesn't feel like a mashup. It doesn't feel derivative. It feels like itself, a show with a voice and a vision that could only have come from this particular person at this particular moment. Hirsh voiced multiple characters on the show, most notably Grunkle Stan and Suze, as well as Bill Cipher. The fact that the show's creator voiced both its most lovable character and its most terrifying villain is a detail that tells you something about the range of the creative mind behind the project. Hirsh could access both the warmth and the darkness. He could write a scene that made you cry and follow it with a scene that made you laugh and follow that with a scene that genuinely frightened you. The tonal control of Gravity Falls is masterful, and it comes directly from the singular vision of its creator. Hirsh also made the crucial decision to end the show after 2 seasons. Disney wanted more. The audience wanted more. The financial incentive to continue was enormous. But Hirsh understood that Gravity Falls was a story, not a franchise. It had a beginning, a middle, and an end. Extending it beyond that end would dilute everything that made it special. This decision, the decision to stop, is arguably the most important creative choice Hirsh made. Because it meant that every episode mattered. There was no filler, no wheel spinning, no stretching a 1-season plot into 3 seasons to satisfy a network's content needs. Every episode of Gravity Falls advances the story, develops a character, plants a seed, or pays off a setup. The show has an economy of storytelling that is directly attributable to its finite length. 2 seasons, 40 episodes, 1 complete story. No more, no less. The most distinctive craft element of Gravity Falls, the one that set it apart from every other animated show and created an entirely new model for audience engagement, is its cipher system. From the very first episode, Gravity Falls embedded encrypted messages in its end credits. These messages were encoded using real cryptographic techniques, not simplified or dumbed down for a children's audience, but actual ciphers that required genuine problem solving to decode. The show used several different encryption methods across its run, escalating in complexity as the series progressed. Season 1 primarily used the Caesar cipher, one of the oldest and simplest encryption techniques, named after Julius Caesar, who reportedly used it for military communications. A Caesar cipher works by shifting each letter of the alphabet by a fixed number of positions. If the shift is 3, A becomes D, B becomes E, C becomes F, and so on. The shift value for Gravity Falls' Caesar cipher was 3, paying homage to the cipher's historical origins. As Season 1 progressed, the show introduced the @bash cipher, a substitution cipher where the alphabet is reversed. A becomes Z, B becomes Y, C becomes X, and so on. The @bash cipher is ancient, dating back to Hebrew scholars, and its introduction signaled to observant fans that the show's codes were going to get harder. Season 2 escalated to the Visionaire cipher, a significantly more complex polyalphabetic cipher that uses a keyword to encrypt messages. Unlike the Caesar and @bash ciphers, which use a single substitution pattern, the Visionaire cipher uses a different substitution for each letter of the message, determined by the corresponding letter of the keyword. This makes it much harder to crack without knowing the key. The keyword for the Visionaire cipher in Season 2 was different for many episodes, and finding those keywords became part of the puzzle. Some keywords were hidden in the episodes themselves, in background text, in spoken dialogue, in visual details that required frame-by-frame analysis to discover. And then there were the author symbols, a completely original substitution cipher created for the show, where each letter of the alphabet was replaced by a unique symbol. These symbols appeared throughout the journals, on walls, and signs in the background of scenes, and in supplementary materials. Fans had to build the substitution table themselves, symbol by symbol, by comparing encrypted text to known plain text. The decoded messages ranged from jokes and teases to genuine plot clues and foreshadowing. Some messages hinted at upcoming revelations. Some referenced characters or events that hadn't been introduced yet. Some were meta-commentary, messages from the show's creators to the audience, acknowledging the fans' dedication and rewarding their effort. The cipher system did something unprecedented for a children's animated show. It created a parallel layer of content that existed alongside the episodes themselves. Watching Gravity Falls was one experience. Decoding Gravity Falls was another. And the two experiences enriched each other. The codes gave context to the episodes, and the episodes gave context to the codes. The cipher system created a community, not just a fandom. Fandoms are common. A community of collaborative problem solvers who work together across forums and social media platforms to crack the show's codes in real time. When a new episode aired, the end credit cipher would be screen capped, posted, and attacked by hundreds of fans simultaneously. Solutions were proposed, tested, refined, and verified through collective effort. The process resembled academic research more than casual viewing. Hypotheses were formed, evidence was gathered, peer review was conducted, and consensus was reached. And the codes were just the beginning. Fans discovered that Gravity Falls was hiding secrets in virtually every frame of every episode. Background details that foreshadowed future events. Blink and you miss it appearances of Bill Cipher's image in scenes where he wasn't supposed to be present. Numbers, symbols, and visual patterns that connected to the larger mythology. The show rewarded this obsessive attention. Every hidden detail was intentional. Every Easter egg was placed deliberately. The production team, led by Hirsh, created a show that had been designed from the ground up to be analyzed at a level of detail that most shows wouldn't survive. Most animated shows fall apart under close inspection. Animation errors become visible. Continuity breaks. Background details are random or recycled. Gravity Falls was the opposite. The closer you looked, the more you found. The more you found, the more you realized was there. The show didn't just survive close analysis. It depended on it. This created a feedback loop between the show and its audience that was genuinely new. The fans' analysis became part of the experience of the show. Theories generated between episodes shaped how the next episode was received. Decoded messages created anticipation for revelations that were still weeks or months away. The audience wasn't just consuming the show, they were participating in it. Hirsh encouraged this participation. He engaged with fans on social media. He acknowledged particularly clever theories. He occasionally seeded misinformation to keep the theorists on their toes. The relationship between creator and audience was playful, respectful, and productive. A collaboration rather than a one-way transmission. This model of engagement, embedding genuine puzzles in a narrative, rewarding close analysis, and fostering a collaborative fan community, has influenced virtually every mystery-driven animated show that has followed Gravity Falls. Shows like The Owl House, Amphibia, and others have adopted elements of the Gravity Falls approach, and the template of show with hidden codes and an active decoding community has become a recognized genre in animated television. In 2016, after the show's conclusion, Alex Hirsh co-authored a physical replica of Journal 3, the in-universe journal that Dipper finds in the first episode. The book was published by Disney Press and became an immediate bestseller. What made Journal 3 remarkable wasn't just that it was a piece of merchandise, it was that it was treated as a genuine artifact. The book was written in character, partly in Stanford's voice, partly in Dipper's, and it contained original content that expanded the show's mythology. It included entries about creatures and phenomena that the show didn't have time to cover. It included Stanford's personal reflections on his experiences. It included hidden messages, invisible ink passages that could only be revealed with a blacklight, and codes that connected to the show's cipher system. The physical Journal 3 blurred the line between fiction and reality in a way that extended the show's interactive philosophy into the physical world. Owning the journal wasn't just owning a book, it was owning a piece of the show's world. It was an invitation to continue the investigation, to decode, to analyze, to discover, even after the last episode had aired. This approach to supplementary material reflected Hirsch's understanding that the Gravity Falls audience didn't want passive consumption. They wanted participation. They wanted to be part of the mystery, not just observers of it. And the physical journal gave them that, transforming a piece of merchandise into a piece of the experience. Gravity Falls is an exceptionally well-written show. The dialogue is sharp, funny, and emotionally precise. But some of the show's most powerful moments happen without any dialogue at all, through visual storytelling that trusts the audience to read images, expressions, and compositions without verbal explanation. The show's visual design is built around contrasts. The bright, warm colors of the Mystery Shack interior against the dark, cool colors of the forest. The rounded, friendly character designs of the townsfolk against the angular, threatening design of Bill Cipher. The cluttered, lived-in spaces of the shack against the stark, geometric spaces of the portal chamber. These contrasts aren't just aesthetic choices, they're storytelling tools. The shift from warm to cool, from rounded to angular, from cluttered to geometric, signals a shift in emotional register. When the show moves from comedy to danger, the visual palette changes before the dialogue does. The audience feels the shift before they understand it consciously. The show is also remarkably good at using negative space, the empty areas of a frame, to create emotional effects. Moments of loneliness are framed with large areas of emptiness around isolated characters. Moments of connection are framed tightly, with characters close together, filling the frame. The visual composition tells you what the characters are feeling before they say a word. Stanley's 30 years of working alone in the basement are communicated not through dialogue, but through visual detail. The cot in the corner of the lab where he sleeps, the coffee cups, the scattered papers, the worn-out shoes, the notches on the wall marking the days. None of this is explained verbally. It doesn't need to be. The image tells the story. The show's use of light is equally sophisticated. Bill Cipher is associated with yellow light, bright, harsh, and unnatural. The Mystery Shack is associated with warm amber light, inviting and domestic. The forest is associated with green-blue light, mysterious and slightly threatening. The portal is associated with blue-white light, cold, technological, and otherworldly. These color associations are consistent throughout the series, and they function as a subliminal emotional guide, telling the audience how to feel about each environment without explicitly stating it. The music of Gravity Falls, composed by Brad Breek, is one of the most underappreciated elements of the show's craft. The main theme, the iconic melody that plays over the opening credits, is one of the most recognizable pieces of television music produced in the last 2 decades. It's eerie, adventurous, and slightly melancholy, capturing the show's tonal range in a single piece of music. But the main theme is just the surface. Breek composed a score for the series that functions as emotional architecture, invisible structures that support the narrative without drawing attention to themselves. The show's comedic scenes are scored with light, bouncy instrumentation that keeps the energy up without overwhelming the dialogue. The mystery scenes use minor keys, unusual time signatures, and electronic textures that create unease. The emotional scenes, the reconciliations, the sacrifices, the goodbyes, use simple, spare arrangements that give the voice actors room to work. And Bill Cipher has his own musical identity, a dissonant circus-like motif that combines calliope sounds with distorted electronics. It's the musical equivalent of Bill's personality, cheerful on the surface, deeply wrong underneath. The music tells you that Bill is dangerous before the plot does. The Weirdmageddon sequences feature some of the most ambitious scoring in the series, full orchestral arrangements that convey the scale of the apocalypse while maintaining the emotional specificity that the show requires. The music during Stanley's sacrifice is particularly remarkable. It starts with the bombastic energy of the battle and gradually strips away instruments until only a simple piano remains, playing a quiet melody as Stanley's mind is erased. The music doesn't tell you to feel sad. It creates the space in which sadness becomes possible, and then it steps back and lets the images and the voice acting do the rest. Gravity Falls features voice performances that are among the best in animated television, and several of them deserve specific recognition. Jason Ritter as Dipper brings a nervous, earnest energy that makes Dipper's intelligence feel like a natural extension of his anxiety rather than a separate trait. Ritter's Dipper sounds like a kid who is always slightly overwhelmed by what he's discovering, and that constant low-level overwhelm gives every revelation genuine emotional weight. Kristen Schaal as Mabel brings explosive warmth and specificity to every line. Schaal's improvisational instincts, her ability to find unexpected rhythms and inflections in seemingly straightforward dialogue, give Mabel a spontaneity that keeps the character feeling alive, even in heavily plotted episodes. Alex Hirsch's dual performance as Stan and Bill Cipher is the show's most remarkable vocal achievement. The two characters could not be more different. Stan is gruff, warm, and grounded. Bill is manic, cold, and ethereal, and yet both are performed by the same person. Hirsch's ability to switch between these registers, often within the same scene, is a technical feat that most professional voice actors would struggle with. The voice cast also includes notable performances from J.K. Simmons as Stanford, whose authoritative baritone gives the author the gravitas the role requires, and Linda Cardellini as Wendy, whose laid-back delivery perfectly captures the cool older girl that Dipper admires. What unites all of these performances is a commitment to emotional honesty that goes beyond what animated shows typically demand. The voice actors of Gravity Falls aren't just delivering lines. They're inhabiting characters. And the emotional authenticity of their work is a major reason why the show's dramatic moments hit as hard as they do. Finally, it's worth acknowledging the unusual context in which Gravity Falls was created. The Disney Channel, a corporate entertainment platform, designed primarily for children's programming, governed by content standards and commercial imperatives that are not typically conducive to the kind of storytelling Hirsh wanted to do. Hirsh has spoken candidly about the tensions between his creative vision and Disney's institutional preferences. The network pushed back on content they considered too dark, too complex, or too frightening for the target demographic. Hirsh pushed back on the pushback. The result was a show that exists in a constant state of creative tension, always pushing the boundary of what Disney would allow, always finding ways to smuggle darker content past the content standards, always negotiating the space between artistic ambition and corporate constraint. Some of the show's most effective moments are products of this tension. Bill Cipher's visual design, a triangle rather than something more conventionally threatening, emerged partly from the need to create a villain that could pass Disney's content review. The show's use of implication over explicitness, suggesting horror rather than showing it, is a technique that Hirsh developed partly in response to content restrictions. In many ways, the constraints made the show better. The inability to show graphic violence forced the creative team to find more sophisticated ways of conveying threat. The need to make the show accessible to children forced them to clarify their ideas to their essence. The corporate environment, paradoxically, sharpened the show's creative edge rather than dulling it. This dynamic, great art created within and sometimes against institutional constraints, is not unique to Gravity Falls. But it's particularly visible in Gravity Falls, and it's a testament to Hirsh's skill and stubbornness that the show he delivered is so remarkably close to the show he envisioned. We've been on this journey for hours now, from the nightmare realm to the bus ride home, from the cipher codes to the composition of every frame, from a triangle with a plan to a family that found its way back to each other. And now we arrive at the last chapter, not of Gravity Falls, that story is told, but of this video, the chapter where we step back from the show itself and ask a broader question. What did Gravity Falls mean? Not just to its characters, to us, to the people who watched it, decoded it, argued about it, cried over it, and carried it with them long after the last episode aired. Because the legacy of Gravity Falls isn't just about animation or storytelling or clever codes. It's about something more personal than that. Something harder to articulate, but impossible to deny. Gravity Falls changed people, and the way it changed them is worth understanding. The first episode of Gravity Falls aired on June 15th, 2012. The final episode aired on February 15th, 2016. The show's run spanned roughly 3.5 years, a period that, for its core audience, coincided with one of the most significant transitions in human development. The kids who watched Gravity Falls premiere at age 10 or 11 were 14 or 15 when it ended. They started the show as children. They finished it as adolescents. The same transition that Dipper and Mabel undergo in the show, the passage from childhood to something more complicated, was happening in real time to the audience watching it. This synchronicity between the show's themes and its audience's lived experience is one of the primary reasons Gravity Falls resonated so deeply. The kids watching weren't just observing Dipper and Mabel grow up. They were growing up alongside them. The fears the show explored, the fear of change, the fear of losing the people you love, the fear that growing older means losing something essential about yourself, were the same fears its audience was experiencing in their own lives. When Mabel was afraid that the summer would end and everything would change, there were millions of kids watching who were afraid of the same thing, not about a summer in Oregon, but about their own childhoods. When Dipper was torn between following his intellectual passions and staying close to his family, there were millions of kids feeling the same pull, the desire to become their own person versus the fear of growing away from the people who shaped them. Gravity Falls didn't just depict the experience of growing up. It accompanied its audience through that experience. It was there for them during the transition, saying the things they needed to hear, that change is scary but survivable, that the people you love can be imperfect and still worth loving, that the end of one thing is the beginning of another, that growing up doesn't mean growing away from who you are. These messages aren't unique to Gravity Falls. Other shows have said similar things, but few shows have said them with this level of emotional precision, at this specific moment in their audience's development, embedded in a story this compelling. The combination, the right message at the right time in the right package, created an impact that transcended normal viewership. Gravity Falls didn't just entertain a generation, it shaped one. Gravity Falls' impact on the medium of animation has been substantial and well documented. The show demonstrated that children's animation could sustain complex, serialized narratives without sacrificing humor or accessibility. It proved that young audiences were capable of engaging with sophisticated themes: mortality, betrayal, sacrifice, existential fear, when those themes were presented with respect and craft. Before Gravity Falls, the dominant model for children's animated television was episodic. Shows told self-contained stories each week with minimal continuity and no overarching narrative. There were exceptions. Avatar, The Last Airbender being the most notable. But the default assumption in the industry was that kids couldn't or wouldn't follow long-form stories. Gravity Falls challenged that assumption directly. Its intricate mythology, its season-spanning plot arcs, its carefully planted clues, and delayed payoffs, all of it required sustained attention and long-term memory from its audience. And the audience delivered. They not only followed the story, but dissected it, analyzed it, and demanded more complexity rather than less. The success of Gravity Falls opened doors for the shows that followed it. The Owl House, created by Gravity Falls storyboard artist Dana Terrace, adopted a similar model of serialized storytelling with hidden lore and complex character development. Amphibia, created by Gravity Falls writer Matt Braley, built its own mythology-driven narrative with a similar blend of comedy and emotional depth. Star vs. the Forces of Evil, Steven Universe, and numerous other shows from the mid-2000s onward bear the influence of what Gravity Falls proved was possible. The show also influenced the visual and tonal language of children's animation. Gravity Falls demonstrated that children's shows could be genuinely frightening without being traumatizing, that horror elements, when handled with craft and purpose, enhanced rather than diminished a show's emotional impact. The design of Bill Cipher, cartoonish yet genuinely threatening, became a template for how animated villains could be both funny and scary. The show's tonal range, its ability to shift from slapstick comedy to genuine terror to heartbreaking drama within a single episode, expanded the perceived boundaries of what children's animation was allowed to do. And the Cipher system influenced how shows interacted with their audiences. The model of embedding real puzzles in a narrative, creating a collaborative decoding community, and treating the audience as active participants rather than passive consumers, has become a recognized approach in animated television. Shows that followed Gravity Falls adopted elements of this approach, not always with codes and ciphers specifically, but with the broader principle that rewarding close attention creates deeper engagement. The Gravity Falls fandom is one of the most dedicated and enduring fan communities in animation history. Years after the show's conclusion, the community remains active, creating art, writing analysis, producing fan content, and continuing to decode and discuss the show's mysteries. This longevity is unusual. Most fandoms experience a rapid decline in activity after a show ends. The initial energy of weekly episodes, new revelations, and real-time discussion gives way to nostalgia and gradual disengagement. The fandom persists in a diminished form, sustained by hardcore devotees, but no longer a cultural force. Gravity Falls fandom has resisted this decline more successfully than most, for several interconnected reasons. First, the show's density rewards rewatching, because so many details are hidden in the background, in the codes, in the visual compositions. There is always more to find. A viewer's 10th rewatch reveals things that their first rewatch missed. The show doesn't deplete with repeated viewing, it deepens. Second, the show's themes are timeless in a way that transcends the specific cultural moment of its creation. The fear of growing up, the complexity of family relationships, the tension between knowledge and innocence. These are not 2012 problems. They're human problems. New audiences discover the show every year, and the themes resonate with them as powerfully as they resonated with the original viewers. Third, the fandom is self-sustaining. The community has developed its own culture, its own jokes, references, traditions, and creative practices that exist independently of the show itself. Fan art, fan fiction, theory videos, analytical essays, and creative reinterpretations of the show's mythology have created a secondary body of content that keeps the community active and engaged. Fourth, and perhaps most importantly, the show's emotional impact creates personal attachment that outlasts casual interest. People don't just remember Gravity Falls, they feel it. The show's ability to create genuine emotional experiences, not just entertainment, but moments of real feeling, means that it becomes part of its viewers' personal histories. It's associated with specific periods of their lives, specific emotional transitions, specific moments of growth and change. You don't forget the show that made you cry for the first time. You don't forget the show that articulated fears you couldn't articulate yourself. You don't forget the show that was there when you were becoming who you are. Gravity Falls is that show for a lot of people, and that personal connection is the foundation of a fandom that doesn't fade. After Gravity Falls ended, Alex Hirsh left Disney and moved to Netflix, where he served as an executive producer and creative consultant on various projects. He provided voice work for several shows and developed new projects, though as of this recording, none have reached the production stage of a full series. Hirsh has been characteristically thoughtful about his post-Gravity Falls career. He's spoken about the difficulty of following a project that consumed years of his life and became inseparable from his identity. He's talked about the pressure of expectations, the knowledge that anything he creates will be compared to Gravity Falls, and that the comparison is, in many ways, unwinnable. How do you follow a show that meant that much to that many people? His answer, so far, has been to take his time, to wait for the right project, to resist the pressure to produce content for its own sake, and instead focus on finding a story that justifies the effort of telling it. This patience is consistent with everything we know about Hirsch's creative philosophy. He ended Gravity Falls because the story was done, not because he ran out of interest or energy. He'll start the next project when he has a story worth telling, not when the market demands content. The same integrity that produced a 2-season masterpiece rather than a 5-season dilution is guiding his post-Gravity Falls decisions. Whether Hirsh creates another show, a film, a game, or something entirely different, the principles that made Gravity Falls exceptional, emotional honesty, narrative integrity, respect for the audience, the willingness to end, will almost certainly be present. These aren't techniques he learned, they're values he holds. And values don't change with projects. In July 2016, several months after the show's finale aired, something unusual appeared in the forest of Reedsport, Oregon. A physical statue of Bill Cipher, a 3-dimensional concrete rendering of the Dream Demon, approximately 3 feet tall, was discovered in the woods, positioned exactly like Bill's petrified form at the end of the series. The statue was placed there by Alex Hirsh and the Gravity Falls production team as part of an elaborate real-world treasure hunt. Hirsh had released a series of clues, encoded, naturally, across social media and in the pages of the physical journal 3. The clues led fans on a multi-state scavenger hunt that culminated in the discovery of the statue, hidden in a forest that looked remarkably like the forests of Gravity Falls itself. The statue was real. You could touch it. You could stand next to it. You could look into its single eye and feel, for a moment, like the boundary between the show and reality had dissolved. This was Hirsch's final gift to the fans, and his final piece of world building. By placing a physical artifact of the show's mythology in the real world, he extended the Gravity Falls experience beyond the screen and into physical space. The show's central premise, that there are mysteries hidden in the world around you, waiting to be discovered by anyone curious enough to look, was made literal. The mystery wasn't just in Gravity Falls. It was in Oregon. It was in the real world. It was everywhere. The statue became a pilgrimage site. Fans traveled from around the world to visit it, to take photos with it, to leave offerings and messages. It was eventually moved, relocated by the property owners after the volume of visitors became unmanageable. But the memory of its discovery remains one of the most remarkable examples of a fictional narrative extending into physical reality. The Bill Cipher statue embodied the show's philosophy in its purest form. The mystery is real. The wonder is real. The world is stranger and more beautiful than you think. All you have to do is look. Years after its final episode, Gravity Falls continues to matter. Not as a cultural artifact, not as a nostalgic reference, as a living, breathing piece of art that continues to find new audiences, continue to generate new analysis, and continues to change the people who encounter it. It matters because it told the truth about families, about growing up, about the cost of knowledge and the value of connection, about the way love and pain coexist in the same relationships, the same choices, the same moments. Gravity Falls never simplified these truths for its audience. It trusted its viewers, many of them children, to handle complexity, ambiguity, and genuine darkness. And that trust was rewarded with a depth of engagement that most shows never achieve. It matters because it demonstrated what animation can be. Not a lesser form of storytelling, not a medium limited to children's entertainment. A full, legitimate, powerful art form capable of achieving emotional and narrative effects that rival any medium. Gravity Falls stands alongside the best work in television, animation, literature, and film, not as a children's show that transcended its format, but as a great story that happened to be animated. It matters because it created a model for how stories can engage their audiences. The cipher system, the hidden details, the collaborative decoding community. These innovations didn't just make Gravity Falls more fun. They demonstrated that the relationship between a story and its audience doesn't have to be passive, that viewers can be participants, that the act of watching can be an act of creation, that the best stories are the ones that invite you in and give you something to do. And it matters because it said something that its audience needed to hear, something that, in a culture of irony and cynicism and detachment, was almost radical in its sincerity. The people you love are worth fighting for. The world is worth exploring. The truth is worth pursuing. And the end of something beautiful is not a tragedy. It's a privilege. Because not everyone gets a summer like this. There's one last thing. Throughout this video, I've been telling you the story of Gravity Falls in the order it was meant to be told, from beginning to end, from the nightmare realm to the bus ride home. I've analyzed the themes, examined the craft, and mapped the legacy. But there's one element of the show that I've been circling around without addressing directly. One detail that sits at the very heart of the Gravity Falls experience. The detail that, more than any other, explains why this show endures. It's simple. So simple that it's easy to overlook. So fundamental that it's easy to take for granted. Gravity Falls was made with love. Not commercial calculation. Not algorithmic optimization. Not content strategy. Love. Alex Hirsh loved his sister, and that love became Dipper and Mabel. He loved the summers of his childhood, and that love became the town. He loved mysteries, and that love became the journals. He loved his audience, and that love became the ciphers. Every frame of Gravity Falls radiates the care of people who gave everything they had to make something they believed in. The late nights, the creative battles, the obsessive attention to detail, the refusal to compromise. The decision to end the show when the story was done, even though continuing would have been easier and more profitable. This is what the audience feels, even if they can't articulate it. When people say Gravity Falls is special, when they say it's different from other shows, when they say it changed them, when they say it matters, what they're responding to, beneath the plot and the themes and the craft, is the love. You can feel it. In every episode, in every hidden code, in every carefully placed background detail, in every line of dialogue, and every note of music, and every pixel of animation. The show loved its audience, and the audience loved it back. That's the final cipher. The one that doesn't need decoding. The one that's written in plain text, in every frame, from the first episode to the last. Love. If you've been here since the beginning, if you've traveled the entire journey from Bill Cipher's origin to this moment, thank you. This has been a long night, a long story, and hopefully, a good one. If you've been drifting in and out of sleep, that's exactly what this video is for. The story is here. The analysis is here. The mysteries are here. And every time you come back, every time you revisit this video, you'll hear something you missed. A detail about the portal, a nuance of Mabel's character, a connection between the twin pairs that you didn't catch the first time. That's how this video was designed. Like the show itself, it rewards revisitation. Gravity Falls is over. Alex Hirsh has said so. The story is complete. There will be no season 3. There will be no sequel. And that's okay. That's more than okay. That's the point. The story was finite. The summer was finite. Everything good is finite. And the finitude is what makes it precious. But the mysteries remain. The woods are still out there. The journals are still waiting to be found. The ciphers are still waiting to be decoded. And the spirit of the show, the curiosity, the wonder, the belief that the world is stranger and more beautiful than it appears, is still alive in everyone who watched it. So here's my last message to you. Not encrypted, not coded, just honest. Stay curious. Trust the people you love. And remember that the end of something wonderful is not a loss. It's proof that something wonderful happened. Good night. And if you're ever in Oregon, watch the trees. They might be watching you back.